Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. At least 10 people are killed after a vehicle hits a crowd of people in New Orleans. The suspect is confirmed dead after a firefight with police. The FBI are now investigating a case of terrorism. US President-elect Donald Trump repeats a warning at his New Year's Eve bash. Hamas better let the hostages come back soon. And the era of cheap Russian gas to the European Union ends as transit across Ukraine is stopped, reviving fears of the 2021 energy crisis. The suspect in the New Orleans attack has died after exchanging gunfire with police. 12 people were killed and at least 35 injured after a man drove a pickup truck into a large crowd celebrating the new year. The incident occurred in the French quarter of the city, which is popular with tourists. The FBI are investigating the incident as an act of terrorism and say they found an explosive device at the scene. New Orleans police say the driver was hell-bent on creating carnage and damage.
It was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. It was not a DUI situation. This is a more complex and more serious based on the information we have right now. With respect to numbers, we have right now, and as you already know, this could change throughout the day.
For more on this, our correspondent Caroline Malone joins me right now from Washington, D.C. Caroline, the FBI are investigating the act as terrorism. Have the authorities provided any more details regarding the identity of the attacker or of the motives?
Well, any moment now there's due to be another police press conference in which they would likely give more information about what they've found so far. What we do know is that the license plate of this vehicle was a Texas license plate from the state of Texas, and reports are suggesting that this car was spotted in Texas just a few days ago. It's unclear, though, if the suspect was the one driving the car. It's actually the car registered to a 41-year-old man from Houston, Texas, but it's not clear if this is the one and the same as the person that ended up driving this pickup truck into crowds of people, killing at least 10 in the early hours of New Year's Day. But certainly we can expect police officials to update us on specifics about what they do know about the suspect so far and any possible motivation. They are investigating it as a, quote, act of terror, but certainly we don't yet know why someone would do such a horrific thing, ramming a pickup truck into crowds of people who are there just to have a good time. There have also been a number of questions raised about the police presence. So the police officials saying there are about 300 officers in and around the French Quarter because of the number of people out celebrating, but that there weren't sufficient barricades put up to stop vehicles from getting through. The police chief saying earlier in the day that this vehicle actually managed to get around barricades, but witnesses actually saying something contradictory to that, which is that there weren't sufficient barricades up. Now, there is a process of trying to essentially pedestrianize these streets for these types of events. Tragically, it's not the first time that someone has driven a vehicle into people and even hurt and killed people. You know, we've seen both in the United States and in other countries, for instance, in Germany not long ago, with people trying to hurt others using a vehicle. So clearly security officials would be aware that this type of thing is possible. Also questions being raised about what will happen later today at a major college football game, an American football game that's due to take place in New Orleans. And it's a big game that attracts many people, not just from that state, but from across the country. It's a New Year's Day tradition. And usually you have crowds up to about 70,000 people that come into the stadium. Those that run the events are saying that they are in constant contact with security officials, with police, with law enforcement, and will continue to update people about what will happen with regard to this event. But certainly what we was indicated by the police earlier is that they don't want people to go anywhere near the French Quarter because it's still a crime scene, but that they are encouraging people to go about their normal lives, as it were, in other places, including for this college football game.
Caroline, public figures have been speaking out about it, including Donald Trump. What has he said, and what more can we take from the rhetoric around that?
Yes, absolutely. So Donald Trump, the president-elect, put out a statement on his platform, Truth Social, just a short time ago. And this was after there were reports coming out that this Texas license plate car, the pickup truck, was spotted in Texas and potentially at Eagle Pass, which is a border crossing between Mexico and Texas. I must say that hasn't been at least verified publicly yet. But Donald Trump coming out and saying, when I said that criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals that we have in our country, that statement was refuted. But it turned out to be true. The crime rate in our country at a level that nobody's seen before. So it appears that he is suggesting there that he thinks at least the suspect has come from a different country. I should reiterate, we don't know that yet. That hasn't been confirmed. And certainly President Biden, when he spoke a short time ago, wasn't ready to give out that type of information, even if it is deemed to be true. And certainly, as I've said, this pickup truck had license plates from Texas and is owned by a man who is from Houston, Texas. So really some questions have been raised here, both by Trump and by law enforcement, about this suspect. And we'll have to wait and see when more of this investigation is laid out about what actually happened here, who the suspect is, whether he is an American, whether he's from somewhere else, and what his motivation was. Certainly President Biden being very clear when he spoke a short time ago that the country will not tolerate this type of violence, and then there's never any justification for this type of tragic event.
We have a lot of unanswered questions, as you say, Caroline, but authorities are reportedly still searching for explosive devices. You mentioned the football game. What is the security situation in the city like right now?
So around the area of the attack, of the crime scene, about 8 blocks have been cordoned off. The police have stopped people from coming and going in those areas, particularly straight after the attack itself. Hotels were evacuated, the area was cleared. And the police were spotted using robots, for instance, to look under vehicles to check if there were any IEDs, any explosive devices, because at least one is believed to have been found. So, you know, it's a multi-level investigation that's going on with the police here. They're concerned not just about this truck, about this suspect, about the fact that he clearly had weapons on him because there was a shootout between him and the police. At least 2 police officers were injured in that shootout. They're believed to be in a stable condition in hospital. There are, you know, a number of people also still recovering in hospital from these injuries, potentially some of them very serious, 35 or so people in different hospitals across the city. But as well as this cordoned off area, there's going to be a very strong police presence on the streets, and particularly around the football game. And I think that's where, you know, questions are still unanswered. We have about 8 hours to go until this football game is supposed to kick off. People would normally be gathering in the afternoon and going to the stadium that can hold up to 60 or 70,000 people. So a huge amount of people that are due to be out on the streets, again, celebrating New Year's Day and also going to a sports event. And obviously, a lot of them will be wondering if they are safe, given what's happened just after New Year's Eve, midnight, in their city. So real concern for people's safety here. But so far, the police have been saying that as long as people don't go anywhere near the crime scene, they should carry out their normal business. But I can expect that we will get some more updates about specifics for people who are out and about on the streets of New Orleans later today.
Caroline Malone, our reporter in Washington, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on that developing story in New Orleans. Now, as the world rings in the new year, concerns are mounting in Europe over a new energy crisis. Russian gas has stopped flowing to the European Union via Ukraine after a 5-year deal expired, marking the end of a decade-long agreement. Both Moscow and Kyiv were unable to reach an understanding to keep that pipeline active as the war extends into 2025. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has previously previously said that his country will not allow Russia to earn additional billions on our blood. In a statement today, the country's energy ministry says that the transit was stopped in the interest of national security, adding that Russia is losing markets and will suffer financial losses. Meanwhile, in Europe, price hikes for gas are expected, with notable fluctuations in Austria, Hungary and Slovakia. Europe has tried to wean off Russian energy resources, but its alternatives are far more expensive. The stoppage will also impact Ukraine, which is estimated to lose $800 million a year in transit fees from Russia, while Gazprom will face nearly $5 billion of losses in gas sales. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico lashes out over the impact the stoppage will have on his country in his New Year's speech.
Nobody, I repeat, nobody is pushing Slovakia away from the living space that is the European community. But we must see that the selfish national interests of the big ones and the meaningless geopolitical goals are beginning to dominate this community. And on the other hand, ignoring the needs of the smaller ones. In world politics, it absolutely applies that it does not matter whether elephants love or fight. The grass always suffers. I do not want Slovakia to be such grass, as we see these days when the transit of gas through Ukraine is stopped, which will have drastic impact on all of us in the European Union, but not on the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, Poland's foreign minister has praised the move, calling it a victory over Putin and Russia following the enlargement of NATO by both Finland and Sweden. I'm now joined by Professor Aldred Moe, who is a senior research fellow at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute and an expert in Russian gas and energy policy. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's a pleasure to have you on. First question, is the era of cheap Russian gas to the European Union over after the 5-year deal expired this morning?
Well, it is almost over, but not completely. Russia is still exporting gas via Turkey into the Balkans. So there are volumes into Greece and Serbia, and also reaching Hungary and Romania that way. Besides, Russia is also still exporting considerable amounts of liquefied natural gas to Europe from its production site in the Arctic.
So, as you said there, Russia can still send gas to Hungary, Turkey and Serbia through the Turk Stream pipeline. Can we expect more gas to flow through this route, and will it help Russia financially?
There are physical limitations on how much gas can be transported on that route, maybe up to 15 billion cubic meters. So the volumes that now are taken out because of the end of transit through Ukraine cannot be replaced by Turk Stream volumes. That's clear. But it is possible to send some more gas through those pipelines if the customers are interested in that.
The European Commission has said the EU was prepared for Russian gas to stop flowing, but Moldova is already suffering shortages. Temperatures across Europe are near freezing in some parts. Can they really survive without Russian gas?
The situation is different in Moldova and in the other receivers of Russian gas, I would say. When it comes to Slovakia, which obviously is a big importer of Russian gas, and Austria, they have a possibility to take gas from other sources via the integrated pipeline system in Europe. But that gas will be more expensive. And that is the problem that the Slovak Prime Minister is complaining about. But it will be substantially more expensive. When it comes to Moldova, which is supplied by another pipeline through Ukraine, they don't have immediate replacement capacity. And the gas to Moldova is very important for supplying a big power station. So they are risking a big shortage of electricity.
Russia has lost an important market. It has been transporting gas through Ukraine since 1991. How much will this impact Russia economically? We know Russia is already suffering from soaring inflation.
Well, in fact, the gas transit through Ukraine has been going on much longer, and it has already been cut down seriously since 2022. The recent or the stop or the full stop of the last transit volumes through Ukraine means that Russia is losing, well, not insignificant volumes, export volumes and income, maybe 5-6 billion euros a year. So that is very important, especially for the Russian gas company Gazprom, who already has big financial problems because the European market has contracted so drastically.
The EU, as you said earlier, has found alternative sources in LNG from places like Qatar and the US. Is this further isolating Russia, and is it pushing the EU into a really high price category, which is unsustainable moving forward?
I think it's quite clear that, at least in the short term, the loss of the volumes through Ukraine will mean higher prices in Europe generally, because the gas market is quite well integrated. How much? It's very difficult to say. But over somewhat longer term, there are other suppliers who are filling the gap, and especially LNG producers around the world. So how this will look in a couple of years is a different issue.
So as you say there, the immediate effects do appear to be light. But from a strategic and symbolic point of view, what does this mean for Europe?
Well, it means that the dependence on Russia is decreasing even further. It has decreased very much since 2022 and now further. And it's very unlikely that Russia will come back in a big way as a supplier of gas to Europe, even if things may change with a peace settlement in Ukraine.
And just one last question for you. What does this mean for the gas prices across the world? Will we see an impact on them? Is the price of gas going to go up, or will it not have much effect on the market?
Well, if Europe is importing even more LNG than it already does, it has an impact on prices in other markets as well. Again, it is difficult to say because there are a lot of production capacities around the world that also will react to this new situation. But I think we can be quite certain that there will be some price impact, but very difficult to say how much.
Thank you so much. That's Professor Ulrich Moe, who is a Senior Research Fellow at Fridtjof Nansen Institute and an expert in Russian gas and energy policy. I do appreciate your insights this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now to some breaking news we have coming in. The authorities in New Orleans have revealed the identity of the attacker as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, who was with an ISIS flag mounted on the track. Meanwhile, Russia launched an aerial attack on Kyiv in the first hours of 2025, killing 2, according to reports. The attack was a rare strike on the heart of the Ukrainian capital. The attack came hours after President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed in his New Year message that he would do everything possible to bring the war to an end over the next 12 months.
Дорогі українці, дорогі українки.
Dear Ukrainians, may 2025 be our year, the year of Ukraine. We know that peace will not be given to us as a gift, but we will do everything to stop Russia and end the war. This is what each of us wishes for. I have no doubt that the new American president is willing and capable of achieving peace and ending Putin's aggression. He understands that the first is impossible without the second, because this is not a street fight where you have to calm down both sides. This is the full-scale aggression of a mad state against a civilized one. And I believe that we, together with the United States, are capable of exerting that force, of compelling Russia into a just peace.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's New Year address portrayed optimism and reassurance while thanking the country's armed forces.
Our independent, free and strong country was able to respond to the most difficult challenges. And now, on New Year's Eve, we are thinking about the future. We are confident that everything will be fine. We will only move forward.
They better release the hostages. That was Donald Trump's message to Hamas during his New Year's Eve gala at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, where the president-elect was asked about a potential ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, talks which have appeared to hit a snag.
Mr. Netanyahu, about a ceasefire deal, you said if they don't have one by the time you take office, there will be halt today.
We're going to see what happens.
Have you spoken with them about it?
They better let the hostages come back soon. Thank you.
Trump first made a similar threat in July and repeated it again last month, warning that there will be hell to pay in the Middle East and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities if the hostages aren't released by the time he takes office. Trump's repeated threat comes as Israeli and US officials say a deal between Israel and Hamas is unlikely before his return to the office. Negotiations have stalled, with Israel insisting on releasing only living hostages in the very first phase, while Hamas demands a permanent ceasefire. Back to a reminder of that breaking news we brought you earlier. The authorities in New Orleans have revealed the identity of the attacker as a 42-year-old Samsuddin Jabbar, who was seen with an ISIS flag mounted on the truck. As the war drags into the new year, Israeli strikes on Gaza have killed at least 20 Palestinians, including women and children. On New Year's Day, one strike hit a home in northern Gaza, while another overnight struck a refugee camp in central Gaza, killing 2 people, according to health personnel at Al-Aqsa Hospital. For more on this, I'm joined by Gershon Baskin, Middle East Director for the International Communities Organization and a former Israeli hostage negotiator. Gershon, can we start with the current status of talks between Israel and Hamas? And what is your understanding of why no solution has been reached despite repeated attempts that we've seen?
Well, the state of the negotiations demonstrates the total lack of trust between the two parties, who each accuse the other of lying and deceiving. They have been talking for months about a phased deal, during which time there would be an initial period of 6 weeks of ceasefire when Hamas will release about 30 Israeli hostages and Israel will release a large number of Palestinian prisoners. It's supposed to go into a second phase of another 6-week period, during which time Israel would withdraw from Gaza. But Hamas is demanding that Israel obligate itself to end the war, and Israel is not ready to do that. There's an argument between Israel and Hamas over the list of names of hostages that would be released in the first wave. Israel is demanding that all the hostages who are defined as civilians, not military, would be released. And in addition to them, anyone who is wounded or sick, the elderly for sure. And Hamas says that they don't have 30 or 32 hostages in that category, and they want to include some of the dead hostages, and Israel is rejecting that. There's no direct communication, and it's very difficult to negotiate these kind of deals when there's no trust. And when the third-party negotiators, Egypt and Qatar, also seem to have their own interest and their own ways of working.
So is President-elect Donald Trump the only person who can put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to reach an agreement, as it appears the Biden government has failed to do this?
Right. Well, it's certainly true that Trump, if he wants to, can apply pressure on Netanyahu, because during the days of Democratic administrations in Washington, Netanyahu always had his Republican friends in Congress to go to and complain about the president or put pressure on the administration. With Trump in the White House and a Republican-held Congress, Netanyahu really has no one else to go to. I've been told by Israeli negotiators that they expect a deal to be done within 3 weeks, and the 3-week target is the January 20th date of the inauguration of President Trump. It is not clear if they intend to do it before Trump enters the White House or after he enters the White House. There are those who say that Israel wants to give this gift to Trump, and there are those who recognize that Trump said that he doesn't want this issue on his desk when he enters the White House. In any event, it's not only Israel that needs to be pressured, Hamas needs to be pressured as well.
If we just go back and talk about the hostages, according to the Times of Israel, just 2 days ago, Hamas refused to release 22 of the 34 living hostages in a partial ceasefire deal. Does Hamas have any access to all of the hostages, and do they actually know how many are still alive?
No, I don't believe that Hamas has all the information of where all the hostages are. There are 100 hostages, according to Israel. Hamas does not control all of them. They don't know where all of them are. Hostages were being held by other organizations, including the Islamic Jihad and the Popular Front. But there were also civilians who were holding hostages, and it's very likely that hostages may be buried underneath rubble of buildings bombed by Israel. We don't know. Hamas doesn't know. Hamas is saying that they need a full week of total ceasefire in order to be able to come out of their bunkers and tunnels and search for the hostages. They're not using any kind of modern communication, digital communication at all, because they don't want to be located by Israel. So it's really an operation that has to be done by Hamas on the ground by going around different parts of the Gaza Strip that they no longer control.
Hamas has been significantly weakened. From the perspective, are the hostages their most important asset, like the only pawn they have left in the game now?
It is their main pawn. It's not their only pawn, because although they've been significantly weakened and they don't have command and control of the entire Gaza Strip, they still have the ability every day to come out of tunnels, bunkers, and booby-trap buildings and kill Israeli soldiers, as they have been doing. During this past week, they've continued to shoot rockets at Israel, even though the Israeli army is spread out across the Gaza Strip. They still have apparently a significant number of operatives, of combatants, and they still have ammunition and weapons that they can use. The hostages is a main point of leverage, but I would say the other main point of leverage they have to their benefit is the whole question of who's going to control Gaza when this war is over. Obviously, Israel doesn't want Hamas there anymore. I don't believe that any of the partners in the region do, not the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Saudis, or anyone else wants Gaza to be controlled by Hamas, because everyone wants to help to rebuild Gaza, but they won't put a single dollar into Gaza if Hamas is continuing to govern Gaza.
How is Benjamin Netanyahu viewed by the families of the hostages in Israel? Is he determined to keep this war going for his own political gain and not reach any agreement?
The hostage is a representative of the overall Israeli population, and according to public opinion polls, between 70 to 80% of Israelis want this war to end and want a deal to be done that would bring all the hostages home at once. Not this phased deal that will take weeks or months to implement and have a million points of exit from it. The public wants this war over. They recognize that Netanyahu wants to keep the war going because that's his political survival. That's what prevents us from going to new elections and from a commission of inquiry to be established that will hold responsible those who failed to protect Israel on October 7th and all the events that led to October 7th. So yeah, Netanyahu has an interest in keeping this war going, and this is why he refuses to end the war.
Thank you so much. That was Gershon Baskin, Middle East Director for the International Communities Organization and a former Israeli hostage negotiator. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Now to a reminder of our breaking news. The authorities in New Orleans have revealed the identity of the attacker as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar. That's according to New Orleans Advocate. It has also been confirmed that the attacker had mounted an ISIS flag on the truck used in the attack. That happened earlier today, that attack in New Orleans. It killed 10 people and injured 35 others. We'll bring you more on that breaking news story as we get it throughout the show, but confirmation on the name of the suspect there. In Serbia, instead of partying, thousands turned to New Year's celebrations in anti-government protest in the capital Belgrade. As midnight struck, they stood in silence for 15 minutes to commemorate the 15 people killed by a collapsing awning at a train station in November, blaming rampant government corruption and poor construction. The government does deny these allegations. And in the British capital, London, the New Year was welcomed with a fireworks display across the River Thames. As Big Ben struck midnight, visitors came from all over the world to watch the fabulous show.
I came here with my friends, and she is from India. She just traveled to visit the fireworks here, and she will going back on 4th of January.
We are coming from Turkey, and actually we are living in Dublin. When we are watching on TV last year, we decided to come here for next year, and we are here finally.
Meanwhile, the Middle East welcomed 2025 last night right here in Dubai, which is renowned for its spectacular Burj Khalifa fireworks display. The world's tallest building was illuminated with stunning fireworks and a laser show. And now over to Africa. Nairobi's various skyscrapers were a flurry of colour and fireworks exploded over the Kenyan capital, welcoming the new year. Revellers and worshippers ushered in 2025 in both song and dance, many expressing mixed reactions to the year that was 2024.
My resolution for next year is basically to be closer to God and to try and make the best out of my life.
...2024 was not good for me. I'm battling breast cancer. One thing I should ask God for, this 2025, to restore back my health.
I'm so happy. 2024 has been a blessing from God. The economy has been tough, but we're expecting better in 2025.
Now let's take a look at some other stories making news from around the world. The woman who was burnt to death on a New York subway earlier this month has now been identified. Medical officials say Debreen Karwam was a 57-year-old homeless woman from New Jersey. She was identified through a fingerprint analysis and her death has been ruled as a homicide. Sebastian Zappet has been charged with her murder and arson after allegedly lighting her on fire and watching her burn to death at a subway station. It's a new year and many people are committed to turning over a new leaf. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has gone one step further and he's actually changed his name. According to the tech mogul's social media platform X, he's now called Kikus Maximus. Musk has also sparked debate by changing his profile picture, which shows Pep the Frog, a meme that has been used by far-right groups. He has offered no immediate explanation for his new name and also his new profile picture. Now, in the US, a wave of new laws have come into effect across the country today, including changes to gun safety, medical marijuana, and also social media. In states such as New Hampshire, the law will allow employees to store guns and ammunition in locked vehicles on their employer's property. Meanwhile, medical marijuana is now legal in Kentucky, but smoking the plant does remain illegal. And lastly, children under 14 years old will not be allowed to create social media accounts, while teens aged 14 and 15 will require parental consent to access those platforms. South Korea is sending the flight data recorder of the plane that fatally crashed this past Sunday to the United States for further analysis. The South Korea Transport Ministry said local investigators have extracted the data from the plane's cockpit voice recorder and will convert it into an audio file. Taking it to the US, South Korea hopes the black box will reveal the last few minutes that led up to the crash, which killed 175 passengers and crew members. It is expected to take about 2 days for investigators to convert the data to audio files. Israel has launched a new airline called Tech Air. This comes amid a series of shortage of flights to and from Israel due to international airlines cancelling flights to and from Israel due to security concerns. The airline will run flights to and from the US on Airbus A330-900 planes until at least the very end of March. A reminder of today's top stories. 10 people are killed after a vehicle hits a crowd of people in New Orleans. The suspect is 42-year-old Shamsullin Jabbar, who was confirmed dead after a firefight with police. US President-elect Donald Trump repeats a warning at his New Year's Eve bash: Hamas better let the hostages come back soon. And the era of cheap Russian gas to the European Union ends as transit across Ukraine is stopped, reviving fears of the 2021 energy crisis. And that's all from us on W News this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Riz Khan is coming up next. Good night and happy 2025.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Hello and welcome, and a happy new year to you. I'm Riz Khan. As we begin 2025, let's go over some of the remarkable guests and interview topics we've covered since the show launched at the start of 2024. As I always point out, we cover leading news issues, mostly conflicts and serious global matters, but also add some human interest stories, attention-grabbing topics, and inspiring people. And 2024 offered quite a lot of those. Talking of inspiring people, one that stood out was the remarkable Slovenian philosopher and public intellectual Slavoj Žižek. We spoke just before the US presidential vote, and even at 75, Professor Žižek shows no sign of holding back his very frank and delightfully candid perspective on the state of the world.
I think that the first question we should ask is,
How come that from the kind of American consensus which lasted till some 15, 20 years ago, how was it possible that a figure like Trump emerged? Don't blame the fanatical right, blame the liberal center. Trump exploited deftly faithful limitations of this benevolent welfare state liberal center. We should begin with self-critique, not just with attacking Trump.
Well, I was going to say, it seems that politics is sometimes less relevant because research is showing that many societies are now looking for strong leaders, and that might explain the popularity of someone like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. First of all, I wonder if you see them as strong leaders in the first instance, and how perhaps society is gravitating towards these kind of strong figures that they want in power.
I agree with you, although I would add that it's more ambiguous. Like, take Trump. Yes, he is authoritarian and so on. But for me, the basic characteristic of an authentic, and I believe in them, authentic strong leader is dignity and this spontaneously emanating authority. Trump is not that. Trump plays a strong leader, but he plays it in an ironic way, making fun of himself and so on and so on. Even with Putin, you can find something similar. He is not dignified. He, from time to time, goes into obscenities and so on. So it's very sad what is happening. I am not some kind of anarchist leftist. Sometimes an authentic, strong leader is needed, and today it is. By authentic, strong leader, I don't mean the one who is a dictator and just tells you what is better for you than you yourself know. No, an authentic, strong leader shakes you, moves you. He makes you feel, yes, we can do this. He opens a new space, a hope. We don't get such strong leaders today.
Now, I know, Professor, you're not a fan of Vladimir Putin, but, you know, can you sympathize in any way with the position of President Putin against military expansion on his doorstep, especially with Ukraine's ambition to be part of NATO? The narrative, of course, in the West is very much against him, but can you see his point of view?
Here, maybe I will disappoint you. I see his point of view, of course. But nonetheless, I have so many friends, not just in Ukraine, but in Baltic countries and so on, so that I don't accept this simple narrative that Ukrainians are engaged in a, let's call it, as usually said, proxy war of NATO against Russia. I think if you look at what goes on in last decades, Russian intervention in Georgia, Georgia, then Crimea occupation, and so on. Just read. I do regularly. I can read passively Russian. I follow their own ideology. It's clear that it's not even some remainder of Soviet Union. It's simply imperial ambition. What I find crucial is that in his two speeches, in 22, you know, when Putin announced intervention in Ukraine, 21st and 23rd of February, he only critically mentioned in each speech one name, Lenin. He even said that Ukraine should be renamed Ukraine of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. So he is really returning to the Tsarist imperial tradition of Russian Empire, where Ukrainian national sovereignty, right to be a state of its own, is negated. I'm very critical towards many things going on in Ukraine. Corruption goes on, economic catastrophe, and so on. But nonetheless, I think when we put pressure on Ukraine, be more for peace and so on, let's face what is their choice. Their choice is not peace of war. Their choice is we resist Russia or we disappear as a nation. Russia is repeatedly saying it, is doing it in the parts of Ukraine it occupies. So I am for peace, for a compromise. But let's be clear, without the Western help, Ukraine would not even be in a position to negotiate for peace. It's precisely the fact that Ukraine was able to resist fast Russian victory which enables serious negotiations for peace. But if I may make here another point, what really worries me is that with the catastrophic Western politics, where they all the time give serious warnings to Israel but put no serious pressure on Israel, what Putin is doing with BRICS, he is now constituting a new bloc so that the opposition will be developed West versus Palestinians and so on, and Ukraine will find itself on the West, as if you defend Ukraine, if you are for Ukrainian defense, you are for Western imperialism, to cut a long story short. And so Putin is, I think, winning in the so-called third world, Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and that's for me the true catastrophe.
The remarkable Slavoj Žižek. I look forward to speaking with him again soon. In terms of news developments, all eyes were on Syria on the 8th of December as a half-century plus of Assad family rule suddenly ended as the opposition group, HTS, took control of the capital Damascus, forcing President Bashar al-Assad to flee to Russia. We managed to connect with journalist Danny Mackey, who was in Damascus as the opposition forces moved in and the government toppled. He was navigating around curfews and power cuts to join our show. And when did you first get a sense that the opposition forces, the military operations administration, as it's called, first arrived into Damascus?
We got a sense when we heard the gunfire in the capital, and we heard that they'd arrived at the broadcasting center in Umayyad Square. Now, when they got to this center, and it was really, the old school traditional head for the media building kind of coup, when they arrived there, they actually issued a statement saying, on Syrian television, saying the regime had actually collapsed. And that was really fitting for a 60-year-old regime, that it would be done in that kind of way. Also, we heard a number of clashes. We heard reports. We could see that they were massing around the edges of the capital. And when you've lost most of Damascus countryside and they've actually infiltrated the center, you could see things had come to an end. But you didn't see any heavy weapons. And what we saw at the start was just militants carrying AK-47s, maximum having a couple of RPGs. We didn't see any really heavy weapons, which suggests that there wasn't a fight at all.
What's been the mood of the people on the street? Of course, we've heard reports of all the celebrations supporting the downfall of Bashar Assad. Are there any voices in support of him?
Well, absolutely not. I think Assad is, dead and buried when it comes to Syria. Even his main coastal kind of support base has pretty much abandoned him. And, why wouldn't they? This was an individual who said that, he would live, he was born in Syria and he would die in Syria. And, when push came to shove, he just upped and left the country, and he left his own security detail behind. He didn't even take them with him, which shows you, there were also reports that he emptied out the Syrian central bank. So this individual clearly had no concern for anything but his own interests. And him going to Russia, applying for refugee status at the end is, really fitting end to someone who has created so many refugees himself.
One of the big stories coming out is how many people have been freed from the prisons.
A number of different people, thousands, and all across Syria, tens of thousands have been released from the prisons, from Adra to Saydnaya to Aleppo, Hama. And many of these people really did nothing wrong, but maybe say a couple of words against the regime, maybe have some sort of, a couple of issues behind them. And some of these people stayed there for decades, especially the political prisoners. There were people who'd been in there since the start of the crisis. And, the Assad regime's prisons were really, slaughterhouses. So many of these locations, to actually find, hundreds of individuals was really a blessing that you could actually see them, because for the Assad regime, this was a place where people came to die. I mean, no one went into Syrian prisons to actually come out.
We heard reports that there were actually people, a large number of people, who were scheduled to be executed on the day the regime fell. It seems they basically got a last-minute reprieve.
Yeah, I mean, for them, it was definitely a miracle. And for the rest of Syria, it's been a miracle as well, because the rest of Syria was probably expected to perish within a couple of days because of the situation in the country. I mean, and when I mean that, I mean the economic situation in the country, which you have an absolutely wrecked financial system. You have a country which, everything's getting more expensive. The salaries keep getting even lower. And, when speaking from an economic sense, an entire population was struggling, to really meet any sort of need. So this was something which the Syrians needed change. They got the change they needed. And going forward, they're going to have to handle how to challenge the many issues which are going to come towards them in the future, which will be substantial and which need many sensible heads.
Danny Mackey there in Damascus as everything suddenly turned upside down. One of the serious global issues we covered in 2024 is the very serious matter of plastic pollution. Plastic is, of course, a very versatile and valuable product. The problem is the very poor disposal of it and the danger that has created for the environment, wildlife and humans. Enter Boyan Slat, the 30-year-old CEO of the Ocean Cleanup, founded by him 11 years ago as a teenager. The Dutch entrepreneur, inventor and dedicated activist has been making a remarkable difference not only by raising awareness, but also actually cleaning up plastic pollution from rivers and oceans. And he sees it as a very achievable goal. Boyan, great to have a chance to have a chat. Now, many would argue you can't put a price on having clean oceans, but you've effectively done just that. You recently revealed your assessment of how long it will take to complete your mission to remove plastic from the seas and how much it will cost. Now, people might be surprised by the numbers, so tell me what you know.
Sure, yeah. So at the current level of performance, so basically what we have already achieved to date, we can clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 10 years' time at a cost of $7.5 billion. So that's less than half of what America is spending on Halloween decorations on an annual basis. Now, so I think, it's compared to a world problem, it's something that we should be able to afford. However, we were also looking to do it even faster and even cheaper. So by improving the way we detect where the highest concentrations of plastic are inside of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, we think we can actually do it in just 5 years' time at a cost of $4 billion. So yeah, really now for the first time ever, we know what it will take to return the Pacific Ocean to its clean and pristine state.
That's a fascinating comparison, literally half of the Halloween decorations in the US. Yep. But give me this perspective, because there are always skeptics out there. Why do you see this as value for money? What else could you get for that amount?
Yeah, so I think it's important to put it in the context of not cleaning the ocean, right? And according to a study done by Deloitte a couple of years ago, the plastic pollution problem as a whole is costing humanity up to $19 billion per year. And if you take into account all the ecosystem services that the ocean is providing, you're actually looking north of $500 billion in terms of harm that the pollution is doing to our ocean every year. So if you think in terms of ROI, it's way cheaper to clean the ocean than to not clean the ocean.
Let me ask you about this, because obviously there's a trail involved. How does plastic get from the factory to the ocean?
Yes, every year humanity uses roughly 400 million tons of plastic per year. During its use, it's providing a lot of value to humanity. It's a versatile material. It's an energy efficient material as well. But unfortunately, not all of that plastic gets collected and processed in a responsible way. So you'll have essentially leakage from the system. And some of that plastic is able to end up in our waterways, so in rivers in particular. And through rivers, it then ends up in the ocean. So, and we're talking about quite a small fraction. So less than 0.5% of the plastic that's being used ends up in rivers and flows into the ocean. But of course, that 0.5% is able to do a tremendous amount of harm to to the environment, to coastal economies, and also to humanity in terms of the potential health risks of that plastic ending up in our food chain.
Isn't that amazing? It's such a small percentage, yet so important. We'll talk more about the important role of rivers in transporting plastic waste to the sea. Give us some idea of what happens when it gets there.
So once plastic is in the ocean, actually most of it only stays in the ocean for a relatively short time. So the majority will end up back on shore, on coastlines, washes up in a matter of weeks to months. And of course, that's still not a good thing, right? Because it damages tourism. Coastlines are also important ecosystems. But effectively, it does, most of it removes itself from the ocean in a relatively short amount of time. But some plastic is able to make its way all the way to the open ocean, where if it does, it will end up in one of the 5 gyres. So that's an area where ocean currents converge, where plastic can enter, but it can never leave. And out of those 5 oceanic gyres that exist on Earth, the largest one is in the North Pacific, and that's also the most polluted one. So more than half of the world's plastic pollution that's stuck in the ocean can be found in that one, and that's of course the infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Plastic accumulates in huge subtropic oceanic areas called gyres. Massive circular currents that trap the plastic for decades, if not centuries. There are 5 gyres in our oceans. The most polluted and best studied is the infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch, located in the North Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and California.
It's interesting, so to explain for our viewers, gyre you mean by almost like a gyroscopic swirl of water, and the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is something that I remember discussing years ago. What is it? What would you want people to know about that, and what do you remember about encountering it for the first time?
Yeah, so it's so if we take the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is the largest accumulation of trash on Earth. This is an area that spans an area 3 times the size of France. It contains more than 100 million kilos of plastic. And what's really fascinating is to, when we take that plastic out and we look at the age of the plastic, we see that a lot of it is actually very old plastic because, again, once it's there to stay. It's stuck indefinitely until of course, it ends up in the stomach of a fish or whatnot. But in principle, it's there to stay for a very long time. So we even see stuff dating back to the 1960s that are still. We even have had a Vietnam War drinking bottle from the U.S. Army that we found in still recognizable shape, still floating around out there in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So that really goes to show that why we have to go out there and clean it up. Sure, of course, it's essential to prevent more plastic from entering the ocean. But if that's the only thing we do, the ocean will be polluted forever because those ocean garbage patches, they persist. And that's why I have to go out and clean this up.
The young and talented founder of the Ocean Cleanup and startling images of the plastic pollution problem. Talking of talent, I was really pleased to meet one of my favourite actors, Mads Mikkelsen, at the large Comic-Con event in the Kazakh capital, Astana. The Danish star is known mostly for playing bad guys in everything from the worlds of Indiana Jones, James Bond, Marvel's Doctor Strange, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. Quite the Hollywood CV. And despite the fact he even played the terrifying serial killer Hannibal Lecter for the TV series, he's actually remarkably friendly and down-to-earth in real life. But Mads does say that when it comes to acting, he prefers being the villain.
I'll take it any day. I mean, back home in Denmark, I get to play all kind of different characters, variety of human beings. And yes, in America, there's a tendency, if you have a funny accent, that they will make you the baddie. But I'll take it.
Knowing you over a couple of days, you just got to be one of the nicest guys. And for the fans here at Comic-Con, incredibly gracious. I mean, your hands are covered with ink from signing. I mean, it's thousands, actually, of signatures you've done.
There's been a lot of people here, and it's massive. And they're very disciplined. They're standing in line. And if they're disciplined and can stand in line for hours, I can also sit for a few hours. Yeah.
How do you feel about the way cinema has gone? Because you do the, I'm going to call it the pure stuff in Denmark, where it's about the acting, it's not special effects, big productions, smaller budgets, and it's all about you guys.
Yeah.
How do you find cinemas going when you see it's all about the action stuff for a lot of the world and the Western movie world?
Well, that's true to a degree. I mean, in America, they still make a lot of indie films and solid, good stories. But obviously, what we know America for is Hollywood, and Hollywood tend to be very high budgets, right? And there's a lot of repeat things. You know, you do the franchises, and then the third and the fifth, and so on. And some of it is fantastic, and some is not. But that's always been the case with that machinery over there. I grew up with American films. I didn't watch small French or Polish films when I was a kid. I looked with fascination towards Hollywood, right? And then later on in life, I became in love with some of the independent films and French films, Polish films. But as a kid, it was the big Hollywood thing. So there's a part of a dream coming true that you actually, at my age, get to have a sword in the hand and swing around and fight some giant monsters. That it is fantastic fun.
And the weird thing is now AI is having such an impact.
Yeah.
Special effects went to another level.
Yeah.
And they made you...
We don't know where it's going, though. I mean, it's kind of in its infancy right now. But I've already seen stuff online, and that's unbelievable. You can't tell the difference between the real thing or not, right?
You and Harrison Ford both made so much younger for Dial of Destiny,
That's
the
true.
Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, that was his technique was one thing, I think it was called deep fake.
That's right.
Right, and they already had a little sample of that after a couple of days, and it was just unbelievable. It's just basically him. As a young man, they took all the frames that he's ever done as Indiana Jones, as a younger person, put them in a computer, and then Harrison, at the age of 80, played the scenes, but they morphed his mimics on it. It was just amazing. In the beginning, they didn't want to do anything with me. They just dyed my hair really black, and I had to tell them, guys, the black hair makes me look really old, so we have to do something.
It's ironic because someone working in news like me, I mean, deep fake has become a major frightening issue.
Oh, it is frightening. Of course it's frightening.
No one knows what to believe or not.
No, that is the scary part. When it comes to news or politicians proclaiming certain things. And there's no shortage of people who would like to use that. So they'll have to find a shape and a form eventually, but it's here to stay. You can't uninvent it, right?
It's online. You're a 1965 baby, so the years are catching up. I'm older than you, so I can talk. But it's interesting you're doing these action movies and things. Are you finding? I mean, do you get a lot of preparation time? Are you physically able to keep up with the stuff?
I'm fairly able. As a kid, I was a gymnast.
That's right.
And gymnastics comes in really handy when you do stunts. And I do take pride in doing all my own stunts. I mean, I can not watch if somebody's doing a stunt that I'm not allowed to do. I just hate it. So it's very rare that I don't get to do it unless it's something with a car or something, right? So, but yeah, I can still do all the stuff. The thing is, you always get bruised up or hurt. You always do. And that's fine. But the healing time is a little different now than it was 20 years ago. It just,
You told a very funny story to me over dinner about you riding for the first time, and it wasn't just even simply riding. You'd mentioned it earlier on. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so they gave me a horse, and I was playing this guy who was an archer. So after like half an hour on the horse, I had no idea what I was doing. They just said, okay, now we go full gallop and let go of the reins. I was like, what do you mean? Just let go of the reins and gallop. So that was the way I learned to ride without the reins, and then shooting this bow thing, and then call upon my bird that would land eventually when I called him. Right?
That was you're going to say you had the horse, the bird, and the boat.
Yeah, that was tricky because my bird hated the horse. He was so afraid of it, and my horse was so afraid of the bird. I was constantly going like yo-yo with this one and this one. It was crazy. But I learned a lot from that. So ever since then, I can actually sit on any horse and do pretty fine.
Now, you know, I've seen a few interviews of yours, and you said you don't like method acting. And some people really bury themselves into it. They don't even come out of character, you know, when they leave the set.
Yeah.
What is it that bothers you?
But I think there's a misunderstanding when I said that. I definitely don't hate method acting, but I think there is a misunderstanding of what that is. Because the whole thing about preparation, you know, you have to learn a certain trade. If you're cutting somebody's hair, you have to learn that in a film. Or you need to be a way to learn something very specific. That's not method acting, this is just preparation. We all do that to a degree. Method acting is a fairly boring technique of being able to repeat certain emotional things. And you will attach it to a physical thing. For instance, like drinking a cup of coffee in a certain way will awaken some specific emotion in you. So it's quite boring, actually. But there is a fascination of people, you know, living on the top of a mountain and for 2 years, and their real life children has to call them a different name. That I find pretentious. But as many other things, people who use that technique, you will find people who are fantastic actors and some who are not. And people who don't use it can be fantastic actor and some are not.
You know, something that happened not long ago, actually it's an ongoing thing, is what happened in that movie Rust, that Alec Baldwin was shooting.
Oh, right, yes.
And it surprised a lot of people to know there were real guns used as props.
That's a disastrous story, that one. Obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know what went down. We don't even have real rounds in Denmark. You just can't get your hands on them. So that's not an issue in where I come from. But having said that, even blanks are lethal. If you shoot a blank on a certain distance, it's a lethal thing because there's so much coming out of that barrel. So what happened on that film, I don't know. It's crazy when you hear when they break it down. Everything went wrong.
What it made a lot of people wonder is how much preparation is there, how much safety. So how much have you seen in the time you've been in the movies, greater preparation for dangers or potential? I mean, the stunts.
Yeah, it's obviously preparing to Denmark is an infancy of stunts and stuff like that. We don't have an enormous industry, so there's a few people running that. But safety has become more and more important. And it is definitely in England and America. I mean, it's because people are suing each other left and right if something goes wrong, right? But it's always been, since I started, it's always been like, I have a responsibility for checking the gun I get and look at it and show my fellow actors that it's empty or that it's a blank. It's always been the case, so I don't know what went wrong there.
The enigmatic Hollywood star, Mads Mikkelsen. Well, Saudi Arabia is transforming rapidly as it heads towards the 2030 vision of a newly charged and vibrant society. A few years ago, women had to be totally covered up and were not allowed to drive cars, but all that has changed. Still, who would have thought back then that I would be speaking with an all-female Saudi psychedelic rock band? That's the sound of Syria, and the band members Nora, Haya, Mish and Thing, not her real name, join me from Riyadh. And Thing, of course, you know, people are going to see you there on the drums. Some might be intimidated by the fact you've got that look. Explain that look to me.
I'll tell you 100%, I'm the scariest person in the band. I pass by people, don't see me coming, and they're like, whoa, what's going on? Some people go, Bismillah, you know, it's really funny. But, so this mask is basically used to reside in my mom's salon at home. She had like collected these vintage and really old pieces from the Arabian Peninsula. They're like antiques, like bangles, necklaces, daggers, things like that. And I remember seeing this one for the longest time ever. So when the band formed like 2 years ago, and we were about to perform, I thought I would wear, you know, like a mask, because I really love like Slipknot, Daft Punk, Kiss. Everybody had like hidden their identity. It was like this element of mystery, and I really liked it as a gimmick, you know, like a prop. and I thought it'd be really cool to wear one. So I got it to the band. I'm like, what do you guys think? And they loved it. They were like, yeah, it works.
What do you think, Mish, is the most kind of misunderstood thing? Because, you know, people are going to be watching this and saying, 4 Saudi women playing this kind of music or have this kind of influence on them. I think there's a lot of stereotyping. How much are you having to deal with that?
I mean, maybe like, well, we were told before, like, if you did a genre that was more digestible, like pop and stuff, you would go really big and whatever. But we wanted to do our own thing, whatever that thing was. And people seem to like it. And the metal scene and rock scene in Saudi is growing more and more. I mean, Metallica came to Middle East last year, and this year they're getting Muse and 30 Seconds to Mars. So it's not really like, there are a lot of people that are into this music here.
Well, you guys are cutting edge, not only in the fact that you've made such a name for yourself already with the first female Saudi group playing, you know, this kind of very unique type of music as well and blend of stuff, but also because you're going to be role models for a lot of young musicians. And I wonder, when it comes to these young musicians, particularly women and girls, perhaps even from your region, what would be the advice you'd give them on taking up the career that you guys have managed to achieve?
Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, our first piece of advice would be just do it. It sounds cliche, it sounds very overused and oversaid, but really just take the first step. Connect with other people around you. If your style is to make music with other people, just like it is for us, then connect with other people. If your way of doing it is more solo, then get in front of the keys, get in front of a guitar, take the lessons, spend the time, put yourself out there on Instagram. Put yourself. If it wasn't for Noura and Mish putting themselves out there and making, recording themselves playing together and playing alone, we would have never found each other. So, and also something that I know is the same for each and every single one of us. We've always wanted to be in a band. And, you know, for some of us, this happened later in life than others. And the one thing that we kept saying when people would ask us, hey, are you in a band? We would say, no, we're not in a band yet. We wouldn't shut it down by saying, no, we're not in a band. It's never going to happen, because it doesn't seem like it's going to happen now. So really hold on to that hope. Dream your reality into existence. This is what each and every single one of us has done, and yeah, it's all possible. As much of a far reality as it might seem, if you do the work, if you show up every day, if you keep a good head on your shoulders, you keep a good attitude, you will get there. And also, of course, if you lean on one another, then you will get there.
Well, listen, I know that you guys are doing amazing things, and you've got a long way to go to carry on and take this out to the world. I wish you a lot of luck. I'll be the old guy out there pumping my fist when I see you in concert live. Looking forward to it very much. Mish, Haya, Noura, and of course Thing, all the best to you. On a side note, thumbs up to Spotify for supporting Syria as an artist in residence, helping them to grow as they break new ground and battle stereotypes. Well, talking of battles, Tyson Fury, whom I'd interviewed back in May, just before he narrowly lost his highly publicised Ring of Fire bout against the undefeated Alexander Usyk, was back for another round against the Ukrainian world champion, with the match rebranded Reignited this time. I headed back to Riyadh for another sit-down interview with the Gypsy King. And here's the quick round of word sparring I had with him at the end of our chat. You know, last time we spoke, we had the chance to do this 12 quick fire questions, where I asked you about competitions, who would win against who. This time, let's do an interesting one if we can. Okay. We do like 10 rounds of names which, when I say the name, if you can, give me a one-word description for that name.
Yep.
You want to try that? So, Alexander Usyk.
The cat.
Okay.
Rabbit.
3 words.
Just one then, rabbit.
Anthony Joshua.
Sausage.
All right. Eddie Hearn.
Fast.
Okay. I won't ask you to explain these just yet, but anyway, Turkey El-Sheikh.
Excellent.
Okay. Donald Trump.
President.
Elon Musk.
Genius.
Muhammad Ali.
The greatest. Well, that's 2.
Mike Tyson.
Legend.
Okay, and then your dad, John Fury.
Papa.
Be careful with this last one. Your wife, Paris.
A witch.
We'll have to cut that one, I think.
That'd be all right.
Tyson Fury, thank you so
very
much. Really, what a pleasure.
All the best. Thanks
Always.
again.
Thank you, sir.
All the best.
Sadly for Tyson Fury, this rematch had a similar outcome to the last time, and Alexander Usyk remains undefeated. Meanwhile, a serious issue was being debated in Britain as it faced an historic parliamentary vote to decide on legalising assisted dying in England and Wales. The bill passed following a very sensitive and respectful debate, but it still faces further scrutiny, and that could mean it being passed into law, modified, or even rejected. We got 2 interesting perspectives on the topic. The first is from the family of a veteran British TV celebrity broadcaster and activist. Esther Ranson commanded huge audiences for her show That's Life from the early 1970s into the 1990s. Now aged 84, she revealed that she's been diagnosed with late-stage terminal lung cancer and has signed up to the Swiss service Dignitas that assists people in choosing their date and time of death. Well, Dame Esther has ended up a public champion supporting assisted dying and was happy it passed the first debate in the British Parliament. Her daughter, Rebecca Wilcox, gave me a personal perspective on the issue. Rebecca, your mother's not known for doing anything half-heartedly, and apparently she contacted every member of Parliament in the UK government before the debate. Is that the case?
Oh, yes, absolutely. She knew that she wasn't physically able to go to the debate. She sent me in her stead, and I sat at the top and sat on my hands and tried not to shout at people when I assumed that they were saying something that I disagreed with or she disagreed with me. And because she couldn't be there, she sent this heartfelt letter filled with comment and fact that she really hoped they would sit and listen to, because that's what she wanted. She wanted everybody in the room to listen to the other side, regardless of the point of view that you come into the room with. Listen to the other side and then make a choice. We know that the public are majority in favour of changing the rules around assisted dying. We just wanted that reflected in the room.
Now, Rebecca, your father, Desmond Wilcox, is also a renowned journalist and filmmaker. I gather both he and your mother had touched on this subject in documentaries in the past. Tell us about that.
They were trailblazers. They would go where subjects hadn't gone before. They didn't mind talking about the things that were difficult. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they covered this subject. Most recently, Mum made a series called How to Have a Good Death. And it was a really interesting eye-opener for her. And I think paved the way for this campaign, because she saw people suffer in a way that was not palatable, for want of a better word, and could not be helped by palliative care. She saw people's shunts fall out, and she saw people's morphine drop off, and she saw people's pain surpass the opioid barrier. And I think that created a deep-seated belief in her that she did not want to go that way, that she wanted something far more peaceful. And my father felt the same way. He had a DNR, he had a do not resuscitate, that was very clear. And I remember in the hospital when he was dying, they were trying to resuscitate him, and Mom was screaming at me on the phone because she had popped home to change her outfit. Not out of it, that sounds ridiculous. She'd popped home to refresh herself because we'd been there a few hours, and unfortunately she wasn't there as he started crashing. So she's screaming at me on the phone that he has a DNR, he has a DNR. And I wasn't able to, or I couldn't, some reason it felt wrong for me to stop the medical process, but actually that's what he wanted. And I really hope that I would be brave enough to do that now. But he never wanted to have a catastrophic brain injury from lack of oxygen, which was what was happening, and therefore live in a vegetative state. He wanted to have a good death, which is what the Health and Social Care Select Committee report talked about. And Mum absolutely echoed that. So their work throughout their lives always touched on difficult subjects and brilliant people talking about difficult things. And I'm not surprised they ended up with the decisions they ended up with.
It was a very difficult situation, of course, you found yourself in, and there are many perspectives on this subject, with some people very, very heavily opposed to it. They see it as assisted suicide, rather than just assisted dying. And I wonder, your mother would have heard a number of these arguments. Was she ever swayed by some of these viewpoints? Did it affect her in any way?
She has listened. She has listened. What she asked of the MPs to listen to her point of view, she has listened to other people. Otherwise, she is not the fair and rational woman that we know and love. She absolutely understands that people have differing points of view, that some people see that there's a sanctity of life, that some people see that there could be a coercive nature to this, that vulnerable elements of our society could be put at risk. But she and I have both looked through all the evidence and know that choice, according to the bill that has been set out, has an amazing set of safeguards around it. The safeguards are the cornerstone of this bill. At the moment, there aren't safeguards. At the moment, we're sort of living in a weird Wild West because nobody knows what to do and the law is a mess. So things can happen without regulation, whereas this would bring in regulation and legislation, and people would be able to monitor it very closely. I mean, it asks for the person that's asking to have an assisted death to apply 8 separate times. And those 8 separate times are scrutinized by doctors and lawyers or judges, depending upon how it proceeds with the committee stages. So there was no way that we didn't listen to other people's point of view, but the thing that kept coming back to us was this is choice, and faith is always choice. And I have many family members who are strong believers in the sanctity of life, but they would never believe that my mum should live in suffering and a prolonged existence just because of their faith.
It's interesting, Rebecca, you raised that issue of safeguards, the safeguards that are there already, and the fact some are worried of the bill, allowing the scope to widen. And I wonder, if you could see any other potential safeguards that might really add another lock to the idea that the bill couldn't go any wider.
Well, I'm not a lawmaker. I'm not very well versed in politics. I've come to this very green, and it's been a very steep education for me in how contrary points of view can cause such emotive arguments. I've had a lot of threats against my life, against my family's safety, just because I believe in choice at the end of this world. So at the end of your life. So it's an interesting one for me that you talk about safeguards when the people that are throwing around the violent terms are usually on the opposite side to me. We turn up to every debate, every campaign, every rally. I'm alongside a campaign called Dignity in Dying, and that's exactly how we try and proceed at all these rallies, with dignity, with compassion, with empathy, and we're hugging each other and we're chatting to each other. And I'm alongside people who are really suffering from very serious terminal diagnoses, including this wonderful woman called Sophie who has stage 4 terminal breast cancer and is allergic to opioids. So at the end of her life, she sees nothing but pain. She cannot have any pain relief. So how does the gentle death of palliative care work for someone like her? With the safeguards that we want, I think this is the most safe bill. In fact, there have been criticisms of it for having too many safeguards. I think at the moment, with the country not decided, with a bit of a rift going on, even though the majority are in favour of it, I think it's good to proceed with this level of safety at this time.
Veteran Member of Parliament Barry Gardiner voted against the bill, despite understanding the perspective of those campaigning for it. He explained to me how and why he made his choice.
I think it's important that we recognise that when we're legislating, we are not simply expressing our own personal preference. And this was the fundamental internal conflict that I had with myself, because I could envisage myself being in that situation as outlined in this bill, with perhaps 6 months, yet to live with a terminal disease, and depending on the nature of that disease, perhaps wanting to avail myself of what this law would propose, which is to be able to have an assisted death. So at a personal level, I could see that. And I also listened very carefully to the stories of many of my colleagues and some of my constituents whose family members had been in that position, but hadn't been able to avail themselves of an assisted death. Some who'd taken their own life, but hadn't been able to have their final goodbyes with their family because that would have implicated their family in assisting suicide, which is a criminal offense. So I had to think very hard about, was it my role to enact a law which would certainly bring comfort and relief to those people, or was it my role as a parliamentarian to pass legislation for the whole of society? And my fear was that if we passed the legislation that would undeniably bring that comfort and relief for so many, but I believe it would also have jeopardized those people who were, yes, in the situation at the end of their life with 6 months yet to live, but who thought, am I too much of a burden on my family? Should I just now opt for an early death? Is my living for another 6 months in this care home or with this care support going to eat so much up of the inheritance that my grandchildren might have on my death that I'm denying them their inheritance? And those are considerations that nobody at the end of their life should have to take into account.
Now, you're referring to guilt.
Misplaced guilt, because there is no guilt in living. You know, you're not guilty for being alive. You are a valued, a treasured human being. And where we lose our capacity to see each other as that, then our society really has changed fundamentally.
But Mr. Gardner, in terms of not having somewhere to go, there are people, such as the famous British broadcaster Esther Rantzen, who's in her mid-80s and suffering from lung cancer, who said if she doesn't have the option in the UK, she'll go to Switzerland, to Dignitas, an organisation that does offer assisted dying. So by not giving them the option in the UK, aren't you simply driving them out?
Well, no, it doesn't force them out, but what it does, unfortunately, and here I feel this very keenly, the point that you make, because as Esther Rantzen wrote to me, as she did to many MPs, and her own witness, her own testimony of her situation was very powerful. And she made the point, I have the luxury, I am wealthy enough to be able to go to Switzerland, but there are people who are not. And therefore, at the moment, as the law stands, as a rich person, I can avail myself of the remedy that I want. I can exercise the choice that I wish to make, but a poor person cannot. And that's a very powerful argument. But as I say, I don't think it overrides the responsibility that I certainly felt to legislate for everyone in society and not just for those who felt themselves in that particular situation as wanting to have the assisted death.
Supporters of the bill, such as MP Kim Leadbeater, point to the safeguards they tried to build in, such as 2 doctors, a judge, 6 months of life expectancy, and heavy jail sentences for those who might ill-advise or coerce someone into assisted dying. So you had talked about wanting another level of assurance. What would that be?
I think there was a recognition, not just from myself, but from others, that there needed to be additional safeguards. For example, the situation of the judge signing it off, that is really a technical formality. It's not there's no investigative powers that the judge has. He simply has to check whether 2 doctors have agreed. I'm afraid that my view on the way in which the medical profession might operate in this is that it is not even doctors who spoke in the debate accepted that 6 months was a very movable feast. Sometimes they give a prognosis, and that prognosis is entirely wrong. I think there was a concern that we would develop into two sets of doctors, those who were known to favor assisted dying and those who were not. And if you wanted that, you simply went to the ones who would sign you off without too much questioning. And I think that is, it was a safeguard, but I don't think it was an adequate safeguard.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that debate in the UK as it continues into 2025. On a lighter note, while I was in Washington, D.C. covering the post-election period and the prospect of another Trump presidency, my executive producer and long-suffering friend, Neil Curry, took it upon himself to put the mood of the US elections into a rather clever poem. Neil's always had a way with words, and that was evident as he stood in front of the Capitol's reflecting pool to personally recite his poem, Election Reflections.
November in Washington, just 1 week on from an impact whose dusty cloud darkened the sun in the eyes of those seeking a different outcome. While the victors, elated in joy, celebrated, the change long awaited had finally come. In the hours before the decision is made, for some the hopes rise, yet for others they fade. Jubilation, sensation, salvation and cheers, tribulation, trepidation, frustration and tears. A zero-sum game for the forthcoming years. Election officials, the target of ire, conducted their counting behind the barbed wire. With careful precision, the electoral decision, uncontested, accepted, and free from derision, enabled the hopes of a tranquil transition. The jubilant victors soon take to the stage. The defeated, depleted walk home without rage. Half the nation elated, the other depressed. But no riots are mounted, no signs of unrest. Democracy, questioned, yet rose to the test. Pathologists sharpen political tools. Post-mortems begin by the usual rules. Pondering pundits with scapegoats to seize. Panelists, pollsters now sink to their knees, while Lichtman considers his new tarnished keys. World leaders are queuing to bend at the knee, to honour the victor not all could foresee, renewing old friendships, regretting misdeeds, offering to service the president's needs, past insults erased, for forgiveness they plead. Will promises made equal promises kept? Will political rivals be shown some respect? Belligerent language softened and sealed, salvation, moderation, return to the field. Can a nation divided be finally healed? Washingtonian dogs still need to be walked. Political chatter still needs to be talked. Coffee brewed up and scrambled eggs downed. On the National Mall there are leaves to be browned and cover the Capitol's historic ground. And the sun still shines on the Capitol pool, glinting eyes squinting like some precious jewel, the ripples now calming, disarming some fears of the journey ahead to the forthcoming years. The tsunami receding, for now, it appears.
Executive producer Neil Curry there, summing up the outcome of a very tense year of campaigning for the US presidency. Now, perhaps one of the most intriguing stories of 2024 was how a 65-year-old British museum curator in Leeds, Northern England, achieved more than 10 million TikTok views for his video tour of the Royal Armouries, using Gen Z language. Mark Murray-Flutter, now a social media star, and the museum's communication officer, Katie Glover, explained the origins of this rather unusual video.
Brat summer is over, bestie. It's time to enter your historical era. The Royal Armouries is the most Sigma day out in Leeds. No cap. What are you waiting for? The vibes are immaculate. Enjoy a goated day out. Slay.
Katie and Mark, really good to have you both on. And Katie, you're the genius behind this idea. And I'm wondering, how did you come up with it and how did you think Mark would react?
So I was actually away from work when this trend sort of started, and it was started by a B&B in Oxfordshire, actually. And I'd seen it was getting a little bit of traction, and I thought I need to get back to work. As soon as I come back from a holiday, I want to do this trend. So I started thinking up how we could tailor it to our collection and make it a bit more like historical. And Mark had been suggested to me by another colleague, and we thought absolutely he's got the perfect cadence in his voice for it. He's a very distinguished gentleman, so he's the perfect kind of foil to what we're trying to have him do. I really wasn't sure if Mark would be up for it or not. I'd hoped he would, but he was really enthusiastic, so that was always an added bonus.
That's it, Mark. I was going to ask what your initial reaction was to Katie's proposal.
Oh, I was actually very intrigued, and I thought this might be actually good fun, something I've never done before. And believe it or not, I was kind of looking forward to learning a new language.
It is. And I wonder if you had any hesitation or worries, Mark?
No, not really, no. No, I trust my colleagues.
Katie, what was it like working with Mark on the recording?
Oh, it was so much fun. Yeah, we did it on, I think it was a Friday morning, just before the museum opened, and it was just a laugh. He was actually amazing and did most of them in one take, but it was really fun behind the scenes, kind of explaining what the different things meant, choosing where we were going to film each shot. It only took us about, 20 minutes, and yeah, we enjoyed it a lot, both of us, I think.
I'm surprised.
From my perspective...
Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, Riz. From my perspective, my problem was trying to understand the context in which these new words were being used. Because when you speak about something or describe something, you can usually understand what those words are referring to. So I was having to learn a contextualization, a context for these new phrases and words. This is the largest display of arms and armour since the 19th century. Very based. Chat, this diorama is sending me. Dioramas are lit.
Mark Murray-Flutter really did slay. While on the subject of Gen Z language, I was keen to point out that in 2023, the Oxford University Press's word of the year was Riz, with 2 Zs, or Zs, as they say in America. I even have a t-shirt to celebrate it. I invited our social media producer, Matty Potter, to the programme to discuss how the English language changes in the hands of younger generations. And then he insisted that I end that show in Gen Z language. Even if it's not considered too cool for someone my age to be using these Gen Z words, I could have a go. So, yeah, so nevertheless, I've asked you to help me prepare a script to close the show, which could be understood by people under 27. I may live to regret this, but thanks for your time and advice, Matty, because I'm going to try this out and we'll see how it goes.
Can't wait.
All right, cheers. Thank you. Man, that episode just hit different, no cap. We spoke to a litty female band from Saudi with more aura than Duke Dennis, no glaze. Spotify put us on with some fire data about the Spotify Wrapped results. W Spotify in the chat. And we spoke to the low-key geniuses behind the Bussin' Brain Rot Leeds Armory vid. And finally, Matty Potter, who's just a chill guy who does our social media, teaches us NPCs, the do's and don'ts of speaking Gen Z. Bro thinks he's fluent. Well, that's enough yapping from me. Blood thinks it's a Kai Sanat Sabathon. Shout out the mafia. I've been the Riz Khan, and we'll see you soon.
That was great.
Did it work?
That was great. What have I created? What have I created? I created a monster.
Slay. I still have no clue what I said. That's it for this edition of our show, looking back on a busy and often fun-filled 2024. We look forward to having you with us for the show throughout 2025. I'm Riz Khan. From me and the team, a very happy new year. See you soon.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson, and with the holiday season upon us, we've decided to take a look back at some of the highlights from the last few weeks. Now, the US President-elect Donald Trump has chosen Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to run a department which will focus on efficiency outside the bounds of the government. Well, Musk, who is amongst Trump's biggest supporters and donors, is known for his ruthless approach to cost-cutting. Well, in the announcement, Trump claimed that the duo will help, quote, dismantle government bureaucracy, slash excess regulation, cut wasteful expenditure, and restructure federal agencies. Well, reacting to the announcement, Musk took to his platform X, saying that all of the department's actions will be posted online, calling for public participation. Musk also said that the process will be both, quote, extremely tragic and extremely entertaining. Well, for more on these developments, I'm joined now by Elon Musk's father, Erol Musk. Thank you very much indeed for being with us once again, Mr. Musk. Great to have you with us. This is another first for the Musk family. Have you called your son to congratulate him?
No, I haven't had time to do that. But it's good news, and it's what I expected, So it's good news, and I think it's good news for everybody. It's time for some house cleaning to be done in these government departments in most places, not just in the United States.
You don't sound very surprised about this. I mean, was there, do you think, a sense of inevitability as far as you're concerned, that this was the sort of role that Elon Musk would be given?
Well, yes, Elon has a tremendous task on his hands. He has a couple of 100,000 employees and a lot of very, very serious things going on in his life. So he has to be available for all that. He started all that, and he has to continue. Can't just walk away from things that are, so much in the melting pot right now. And so time, of course, is a big thing. And I'm very glad to hear that he's going to share this portfolio with Vivek, because that will be better. People at Elon's level and that have a great deal of their time is taken up every day by the decisions. So to have him sit in an office somewhere in Washington, waiting and twiddling his thumbs, no, he has to be called upon on a sort of consultancy basis.
We're going to talk a bit more about the role and how it's going to be shared with Vivek Ramaswamy in just a moment. But I just want to ask you why you think Donald Trump chose him for this job and what you think he brings to the table.
Well, obviously, Elon has started the only viable space launch facility on basically, nothing. He had almost nothing to start it with. And he started the biggest motor car company in the world with nothing, almost nothing to start it with. He didn't have big money behind him or anything like that. He used money he had to make sure that he could do that. And he's very frugal. He's always been frugal as a young boy. And he wants to do things as cheaply and better and quicker than anyone else. And I can't think of anyone more suited to a role like this than Elon. So, for example, when they bought X, he went in, saw what was going on, sent his cousin, my brother's son, in and said, clean this place up. And they reduced it from 8,500 to 1,000 employees. And it now functions better than it ever did.
You've, of course, known your son for 53 years now, and you mentioned some of the traits he demonstrated when he was younger. I just wanted to ask you to share an anecdote about your son, if you feel able to, something that perhaps showed you very early on that this was no ordinary son. This was a son who was perhaps going to be the richest man in the world.
Well, there's a lot of things I can think of. There's so many, but I can tell you one that I repeated now quite a few minutes ago to Swedish TV, and that is that once in about the 80s, we were due to go to the two sons, Elon and Kimmel, grew up with me. You know, from the entire school period, they stayed with me. And on a particular holiday in South Africa, we were due to go to a function, a sort of friends function. And it turned out that we didn't have any money. And in those days, you could only get money by taking a check to the bank and cashing it. There were no ATMs, and you know, there were no cards or anything like that. So you went and you could only buy fuel, petrol, gas with cash. And so we were due to go to a place which was some distance away, and we suddenly realized, well, we can't go. And so we were about to perhaps give them a ring and say we can't make it, when Elon said, I have some money in my drawer. He was about 15 or so, and went up to his desk, and he had this big desk I provided for him from our engineering office. And in one of the metal drawers we pulled out was a huge heap of coins. You know, in those days, coins were the way you bought things. I mean, it was more coins than anything else. And there was this huge heap of coins. And we counted out about, I don't know, let's say in dollars, we counted out about $500, $600 in coins. And so we suddenly had money. And the reason was he never spent his pocket money. He never spent it. He never used it. He just didn't spend it. And I think that's a very good indication. You know, with my other children, I can think of, you know, they would usually spend their money in advance. So, you know, so Elon was not like that. He's incredibly frugal, almost to a point of, you wish he wasn't that frugal, you know. He lives in a little house in Boca Chica, two little prefabs pushed next to each other with a gap between them, which they've turned into a sort of barbecue spot between the two. And he lives in the one with his guard, one or two guards, and then the other one is filled with a few bodyguards. And, you know, that's how he lives. And if you want something when you go there, you have to get it yourself. You have to make your own tea or coffee, or if you want a sandwich or something, you have to make your own.
Very telling indeed. Now, Donald Trump, of course, has received millions of dollars in help from your son. That obviously gave him a big boost on the campaign trail. I mean, do you think there's a sense here that Donald Trump really does owe him for that electoral victory?
No, not at all. Well, yes, I mean, I would say Elon becoming involved was the turning point for, in my opinion, it's a turning point for the election for Donald Trump. I mean, it's a turning point for Elon throwing his weight in. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But no, we don't want anything from the government of America or from Mr. Trump. We already have everything. So we don't need anything. We've got everything already. So what we would like is to be able to help other people to have things and to improve circumstances for other people. We don't want anything at all from in return, nothing at all.
But it's clear that even in the last week, I mean, since it became clear that Mr. Trump had won the election, your son's been pretty much permanently at Mar-a-Lago. Correct me if I'm wrong, if he hasn't been at Mar-a-Lago, but it's been reported that that's where he's been the last week. And it sounds, therefore, that he's going to be exerting quite considerable influence on the president-elect and his choices for the rest of the lineup.
Yes, but at the same time, Elon is a team worker. You know, he's proved that with all of the people he's got, with you know, all the different companies. He's a great team worker. So he's not going to try and throw his weight around or anything like that. I think you can expect only the best sort of decisions from Elon, mainly because he hasn't got time to become embroiled in arguments or anything like that. I think he will. I think Trump and Elon are very much on the same wavelength. I've followed Trump since the 70s because I've been in the same sort of business. Trump turned the west side of Lower Manhattan, which were railway sidings, into some of the most beautiful buildings in America. And, you know, that's the sort of work I tried to do, I was doing. And, you know, Elon is going to add to Trump's performance, I would say, very much so. Elon is a teamwork, and he wouldn't join if he wasn't completely happy. I know that for a sake, that for sure. I mean, Elon would only do this if he's, you know, totally committed. Otherwise he wouldn't bother.
Just looking at his trajectory over these 53 years, and you mentioned him in the early days, looking after his pocket money very carefully and obviously growing some very successful businesses in his 20s and 30s and 40s. I mean, looking at that trajectory, we don't seem very surprised by a lot of his achievements. I'm just wondering, would you be surprised if perhaps he had his eye on the top job perhaps in the years to come?
Well, you know, obviously a lot of people have gone onto media and said, you know, this is the type of person we would like to have as president. But I think at this time, you know, you don't want to ruffle feathers. I think the same thing could be said to Vivek and to all of them. You know, is your eye on, you know, the presidency in 32 and 28 and so on? No, I think none of us are thinking like that. We just want to make sure that this is a big success. I mean, America has been on the wrong road for 4 years, and a very bad road. And getting it right again is not going to be an easy task. It's going to be very difficult. And, you know, I think I can honestly say that Trump has united America. So if you look at a map of America now, it's all one color. And so we have a situation that the people will be very much behind him. And these people who are generally out to cause trouble, I think they're just going to disappear. You know, I saw this morning that CNN's on the point of bankruptcy. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't even know how they continue as it is. So, you know, Elon has no eyes on anything more than trying to make sure that whatever he does now, he doesn't give a half a job, and that he's able to give a proper job without affecting his own work, you know. I think that would be a big concern to him, that, you know, having to give up many of the meetings and board meetings and so on he has to make with his existing companies, of which he's the chairman and CEO, is very difficult if he has to say, well, I can't do that, I have to go to the government. So he'll be trying to see how on earth he can make sure that he covers everything. And I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will.
There's going to be a lot of multitasking required. And just in terms of the personality of your son and also Donald Trump, I mean, they've got some traits that, you know, as an outsider, I don't know either person, but they've got some traits that one could say are similar. They're both said to be competitive. They both seem to be disruptors. I'm just wondering if you think that's justified, and whether you think they've got other personality traits in common, the two men.
Well, yes, you know, I told... many years ago, about 8 years ago, the boys held a party for my birthday in Cape Town, and they brought about 20 film stars and important people from America to this party. And during this party here in Cape Town, one of the people that came was with Hollywood. He said to me, John Favreau, he said to me, we believe you support Trump. And I said, well, yes. And everybody had a good laugh about it. And you know, I said, he said, why do you support Trump? And everybody was laughing their heads off. And I said, well, not Elon and Kimball, they just kept quiet. They were very upset about it afterwards. And I said, you know, I support Trump because he's just like us, I said to Elon. He's just like us. That was the actual words I said to my son 8 years ago. I said, he's just like us. And so that answers everything. And afterwards, Elon and Kimball were both very upset and said I embarrassed them. But since then, they've thrown off that type of friendship, and they've focused more on, you know, other people, and they don't worry about the Hollywood crowd anymore, you know.
But it means that they will see the other side of the story if people criticize Donald Trump. They'll be able to see
Elon
why.
is dead center. Let's just make clear here. Elon is dead center. He's not far right or anything like that. He's dead center. And to a large extent, Trump is dead center. I know people can't understand that. I mean, it was only a few years ago that Trump was, you know, a flaming Democrat, and so was Elon. So they're dead center. And there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind that someone coming to Elon from the so-called left with a very good idea, Elon's going to say, oh, I don't want your idea. He's going to say, yes, come and tell us your idea. Elon will be quite happy to take advice from people who consider themselves far left or whatever, you know, because he's not on some sort of limb anywhere. He's right in the middle. And people can bank on that, what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like you've steered him quite considerably politically during these 8 years. And oriented towards a different political path. I'm wondering, what do you think did it? What made him sort of change his views? How did you manage to convince him?
Well, you know, I live in the sort of real world. I'm not in America. I live in a world where I unfortunately have to walk around armed all the time. So, you know, a dangerous place. So he doesn't, many of the places in the world don't have that problem. And so I've had to learn from my own experience what works and what doesn't work. And, you know, we'd all like some sort of, I suppose you call it some left-wing utopia. But in reality, you know, life is not about left-wing utopias. It's about the real things that we have to deal with every day. And, you know, no, Elon is going to be dead center. He's learned from me. I haven't taken it up with him. Fortunately, just recently, he was kind enough to say to a whole group of SpaceX employees that he learned everything about engineering from me. He announced to the crowd, which I think is rather nice of him to have done. But I said, no, you didn't. You learned yourself. But he has listened to me, and I'm obviously very pleased to see where he is at the moment. He doesn't have to pretend anymore and to try and have friends. And in the past, it was to a large extent pretending so that you could be with people who seem to be fun or something like that. No, Elon is, as I say again, dead center. He will listen to anyone from the left or so-called right. He's not you know, anything specific. He's right in the middle.
Well, it sounds like he listens to Dad more than quite a lot of other 53-year-olds I can think of.
Yes, he listened to me. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, they always listen to me. You know, I've always been a sort of big figure in their lives, so it's been moving to another continent and being far away from me to, you know, put Dad, you know, in a pot and put the lid on, you know, so that I'm out of range of telling them what to do all the time. No, things have worked out very well, and in that regard. And so, no, I think we can all be very grateful, and we'll have a safer world now. And I've no doubt whatsoever, even before the end of the year, that the Ukraine war will end, that the people in Hamas, there's two stories in Hamas, there's two versions, there's two reasons. The argument has two sides, and there will be a settlement in Hamas, in Israel and Palestine, probably before the end of the year. Because the people who were doing it before were not working for that. They were working to keep the war going.
Sure. And I did promise I would ask you a few questions about the role that your son is going to be fulfilling, this new Department of Government Efficiency. As we've been saying, he's going to be working on that portfolio with Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, what's your understanding of what exactly they're going to be doing?
Well, you know, I would say the sky's the limit with Elon. Elon will look at things from the bottom to the top. There won't be some, you know, little bit of interference here and a little bit of interference there. No. Elon will look at the whole thing from the top to the bottom. What is the purpose of this department or whatever it is? Who is doing it? And how are they doing it? How many people do it? How many people are? And so on. He's going to, Elon handles it totally. You have to bear in mind, in 20 years, he's built the biggest car company in the world. So you have to realize that to do that, you have to have an understanding of how things work from the very small to the very big.
Yeah, I mean, he's known for a management style that I think by his own admission is fairly ruthless. I mean, he fired a large percentage of the employees at Twitter, 80%, I'm told. Yeah. Do you think that he's got similar plans for some of these government departments?
Yes, I would imagine, yes. Yes, I would imagine so. The idea would be to trim, you know, Twitter now operates on 1,000 employees better than it did on 8,000 employees. So, you know, there's no doubt about it that he's going to improve things. And, you know, it's not bad because a lot of people whose lives are being wasted in jobs that have no real level of producing anything will now be released, possibly be released into the productive side of the world and into productive employment. And I think that's very, very good. Very, very important thing to do. You know, a lot of these other countries like England are now trying to tax their way out of poverty. You can't do that. You have to put people into production. You have to make things. You have to produce things. And then you will see everything come right.
Yeah, I mean, your son said at one point he could find cost savings to the tune of $2 trillion US dollars. That's roughly a third of the total annual government expenditure. And he also said that this is, after all, public tax money that's being wasted. Let's just listen to a clip of what he actually said about that.
All government spending is taxation. So whether it's direct taxation or all government spending, it's either becomes inflation or it's direct taxation. Your money is being wasted, and the Department of Government Efficiency is going to fix that.
Okay, so some big savings to be found. I mean, where, Mr. Musk, do you think these savings can be identified?
Well, you know, he will find all those savings, and I think any sensible people, not just Elon, put in a job like that, who are good at whatever they've been doing, will immediately do exactly the same as what Elon will do. It's not like it's some unique ability. You know, a couple of years ago, the Biden administration earmarked or paid $500 million to have charging stations built for electric cars. No one knows where the $500 million went. No electric charging stations were built. In that same time, Elon put up thousands of charging stations. So the $500 million that Biden handed over for electric charging stations for the government to build in America, nothing was built. I mean, I think anybody who's paying tax should say, I want my money back.
Indeed. And I mean, it sounds like, you know, just from what we've been hearing from your son and from what you're saying as well, your son has posted on his own platform X, Department of Government Efficiency, that's about his new job, Doge. The merch will be, and then he's put some fire emojis, and then he said, threat to democracy, question mark? Nope, threat to bureaucracy. I mean, it sounds like there's going to be a real shock to the system, some real electric shock therapy for these government departments.
But we've all been looking for this for years. We've been looking for this. People like myself have been looking for this for years. I live in a country now where there's not where the money that is wasted every year is beyond calculation, and we don't have a single government department in this country that functions. You know, there's not a single functioning government department in South Africa, and so what are they doing with all the money? You know, if people here want to go overseas, they can't get passports. They can't. We don't have any. We are in such trouble here, and the money just keeps getting spent every year. So it's not rocket science. This is common sense, and I think people should thank the Lord that finally, at least, if nothing gets done, at least something was said about having something done to put an end to this incredible waste that's going on all the time. I mean, recently FEMA in America ran out of money because they've been providing for illegal immigrants. So when they had the hurricane, they couldn't provide for Americans. They had no money. This is crazy, crazy stuff. So, no, there's no doubt whatsoever that this is a very good thing, and people should be looking forward to it very much so. Looking forward to it very much so.
Okay, so for some of those people in those
government departments in America are going to be trimmed down. Let's make no mistake about that.
Sure, and if you were in one of those government departments, first of all, if someone said to you, Mr. Musk, what's your son's management style? How would you describe it in one word? What would you say? And as an extension of that question, how would such a person want to make sure they were fully prepared for a visit from your son, who might be going in there with the axe to find out ways to save some money?
I mean, people who are doing nothing, and they know they're doing nothing, and they pick up a fat check every month for doing absolutely nothing, and their only job is to try and make sure that they move up to the next level and get the next level of car and all that sort of stuff. That's no good. So these people will know who they are, and it's time for that to happen. Their lives will actually improve. There are many people who've been, being fired is not such a big deal in America. You know, people sometimes are proud that they were fired from someplace. I remember Steve Jobs was very proud when he was told people he's been fired from Apple. And so, because he said it's no good, Apple's no good, I'm glad I was fired. And then he went back and re-established Apple. But no, people will find that their lives will be much better once they go out and take on life, the type of life they were meant to take on, instead of sitting in a government office twiddling their thumbs and pretending that they're doing things, pushing papers around from one side of the table to the other.
Just looking at reaction to this appointment, Senator Elizabeth Warren, I'm sure you have an opinion on her, made a slightly sarcastic comment. She said the Office of Government Efficiency is off to a great start with split leadership, 2 people doing the work of 1 person. Yeah, this seems really efficient. Do you think she's got a point? Why are 2 people doing this job?
You say that somebody said that because it's shared between Vivek and Elon, that it shouldn't be like that. What are you saying?
That's what Elizabeth Warren said. She said the office is off to a great start if it's split between 2 people.
I must say, anything that Elizabeth Warren says, I suggest you write it down and take it to the nearest dustbin and throw it into the dustbin.
But how do you think the job will be divvied up between your son and Vivek Ramaswamy?
Well, it's a relief for me. It's apart from the stupid people who say things like that, it's a great relief to me, because I believe Vivek also has responsibilities, and so and the type of job that they're looking at taking on is really a mammoth job, and so it's a real big job that they're faced with. And so the idea that they will be helping and looking at this together, and of course will also add a level of maybe empathy in if they work together. The one might say to the other, under certain circumstances, maybe this is all right, or let's give this a chance. So I think it's a very good thing. Certainly from my point of view, it means Elon is not saddled with this whole problem all on his own. It's just too much. So the 2 of them together, brilliant idea.
I mean, there will be criticism, though, won't there? It's pretty inevitable. Not just Elizabeth Warren, but others saying, Elon Musk has been put in a position of authority inside the very administration which he fundamentally regulates and often uses his businesses. Those who think there's a conflict of interest here.
No. In the world of technical things, people who fly aeroplanes and things, of course, like this, cars, rockets, everything, the very people who set up these companies that build aircraft and cars, and you might say things that could be can be involved in people being hurt and stuff. The very people that do that, they're the ones that write up the rules for that in the beginning. It's not written up by bureaucrats. The very people themselves who do that wrote up their own rules to say, we got to do this, and we've got to do it like that, and we've got to do it like this. And it was only afterwards that the bureaucrats come along and take those rules and see how they can stretch them around or whatever. No. Responsible people who start doing things that are of a dangerous possible nature also include in that how they are going to go about doing it safely. So, no. Elon is very much in favor of the regulation, and that everybody must abide by the regulation. Proper regulations, meaningful regulations. So there's no way. Elon had electric cars that could self-drive 8 years ago, in 2015, in fact. And I've been in a car that could self-drive.
Sure. And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, your son is, of course, the richest man on the planet. I just want to take a very quick look at how he got there. We have this quick report.
Hi, everyone.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
And they're on your screen.
Dankeschön für alles.
Just lastly, Mr. Musk, it's been great talking to you. It's obviously been a great year for the Musk family, great year for your son. Have you sent him your Christmas wish list, and what's on it?
No. You know, even for me, Christmas is very far away still, you know. We have too many things day by day. Christmas is in the far distance. But fortunately, the family's getting together for Christmas. And I'm not even sure of dates or anything like that. But I would certainly wish him the best of everything. But at the moment, I think they all deserve a bit of a rest. So let's hope that they do have a bit of a rest. Thanksgiving's coming up, which is very good. So that gives them a 4-day weekend, thank God, you know.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy year for your son next year, that's for certain. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us once again here on Al Arabiya News. Elon Musk's father, Erol Musk, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian foreign minister is calling on NATO allies to send at least 20 more air defense systems to stave off Russian attacks. This following on from the recent strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Well, let's get some more analysis now from Sir Gerald Howarth, who is the former British Defence Minister. Sir Gerald, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. The British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, gave an important speech on foreign affairs at the Lord Mayor's annual banquet in London. We heard a clip of it before we crossed to you. The UK, he says, is going to continue backing Ukraine for as long as it takes. I mean, do you get the impression that the UK has done enough?
No, I don't think the UK has done enough, but then the UK has done far more than virtually every other country, except, belatedly, of course, in the case of the United States, where President Biden, pressed by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, did eventually take action. But all his actions have been wrung out of him after pressure, a bit here and a bit there, and it's all, I'm afraid, in my view, too late. But the United Kingdom has played an important role, and in fairness to the current government, I think that Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has been uncompromising in his assertion that the United Kingdom stands foursquare with Ukraine, but under no circumstances should we or anybody else tell Ukraine to give up their sovereign territory to Russia as a result of its brutal invasion. That would be reprehensible in my view, not least because we are signatories to the Budapest memorandum signed 29 years ago this week by the President of Russia, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, President of the United States, under which we agreed to respect the sovereignty, independence and existing borders of Ukraine in return for Ukraine giving up its entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. So Russia is in flagrant breach of an agreement itself signed.
Yeah, I want to come back to you on the Budapest memorandum in just a moment, but I want to pick up on something else you were saying at the beginning there about how a lot of the weaponry that has been given to Ukraine, a lot of the assistance that's been given to Ukraine has come rather late in the day. And I'd just like to ask for your thoughts on that. Why don't you think it was given earlier?
Oh, it's perfectly clear. It was not given earlier because of a fear of escalation. We were too timid, in my view. I thought right at the outset that we should do absolutely everything possible, throw as much weaponry in support of Ukraine as we possibly could. It frustrated me that the Germans weren't prepared to send tanks, the Americans weren't prepared to allow F-15s to go to Ukraine. And it was all just too little, too late. And Putin could see that and has taken advantage of it. When all those tanks were lined up outside Kyiv, when they were stuck in the mud, I must say at the time I thought, well, the answer is just zap the whole lot of them and send them back to Russia. But the fear of escalation has dogged us all the way through. And Putin's played upon it.
Indeed, that's something we've heard a lot from our Ukraine guests, the psychological dynamic to this warfare. Do you think with the benefit of hindsight, you'd say that there should have been boots on the ground? Ukraine's allies should have sent in soldiers?
Well, I did suggest that right at the outset. So in my case, I would argue it was not with the benefit of hindsight, is what I thought at the time we needed to do. But it was clearly going to be a very, very tricky, potentially very dangerous move to have made by the United Kingdom and our allies. So we certainly couldn't have done it on our own. But belatedly, everybody now is saying that Russia must not be allowed to succeed. Now, if they'd said that right at the outset, taken action immediately, imposed all the sanctions immediately, cut off the oil supply, and delivered the weapons, it might have been a different story. But dribbling out support as we have done over the past 2.5 years has not been in our best interest. But even now, if we can supply the equipment that President Zelensky has asked for, we should do so. Meanwhile, we need to ramp up our own military production in the United Kingdom, across NATO, and in the United States too.
So just to pick up on what you've been saying, Sir Gerald, you'd sort of put this reluctance in the early days down to one thing, notably fear.
Yes, it was fear that it would cause escalation and that Russia would do goodness knows what. And all we have seen is escalation, but escalation by Russia. And now we have Putin saying that Biden is prolonging the war. Hold on, Mr. Putin. You didn't say this was a war. You said this was a special military operation. You are a liar. You are also arraigned before the International Criminal Court. There is a warrant out for your arrest. You have been abducting children, apparently in your own presidential aeroplanes, from Ukraine to Russia to Russify them. You are a rogue state, and you need to be dealt with as rogue states need to be dealt with. And very significantly, we've just heard this morning from the new Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, who said that Russia and China have tried to destabilize nations with acts of sabotage, cyber attacks, disinformation, and blackmail to intimidate us. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, these are disturbing the entire world order. And we need to understand that unless we nip this in the bud, we are going to be back to where we were in the 1930s. And this is a very, very serious risk. And constantly being concerned, oh, we mustn't escalate. It is our failure. It is our fear of escalation by us that has resulted in the escalation by Russia of their unacceptable, disgusting brutality. And we simply have to stop it. If we do not stop it, imagine what the consequences will be. Who will be next? Because make no mistake about it, if Russia is allowed to keep some of the land that they have bombarded and stolen, whose people they have destroyed, whose buildings they have destroyed, do not imagine they are going to stop there. And you've heard today that the Kremlin has said that if NATO agrees to allow Ukraine to cede land to Russia and maintain and join NATO for what remains of Ukraine, the Kremlin would not accept that. These are nasty, nasty, brutal people, and they are liars. Their word cannot be trusted.
And yet, Sir Gerald, the British Prime Minister seems to be conceding to the fact that there should be and there will be a negotiated end to this conflict. Should Ukraine's allies, in your opinion, sit down at the negotiating table and negotiate with Vladimir Putin, given what you've just said about him?
Absolutely no way whatsoever. As I said right at the outset, the only people who are authorized, who have the right to cede part of their sovereign territory to another state are the people of Ukraine. If that is to happen, it must be a decision for them, and it is not our business either to advise them so to do, let alone to negotiate on their behalf with a brutal, repressive regime like that which operates in Moscow.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said about the Budapest memorandum, because some of our viewers might not remember the significance of it. As you say, it's a nearly 30-year-old agreement, and it was intended, correct me if I'm wrong, to protect Ukraine in precisely the type of situation in which Ukraine finds itself today. Do you think, therefore, that this agreement is dead in the water?
Oh, clearly it's been dead in the water since the 22nd of February 2022, when Putin launched his brutal invasion of Ukraine. His forebear, his predecessor, Boris Yeltsin, was a signatory to that agreement. Therefore, Russia was bound by that agreement, as were the United Kingdom, the United States, and Ukraine. And it's a very simple question. Would Russia have invaded Ukraine had it still had the nuclear weapons which it gave up in response to the Budapest memorandum? Of course not. Any more than Russia is going to attack the United States or attack the United Kingdom, because we have nuclear weapons. We have the targeting arrangements on Russia, and therefore we would retaliate immediately if they were to launch any kind of nuclear strike on any of us. So that's why Putin is not going to do it. So the Budapest memorandum, of course, is rather important for your viewers. You're absolutely right. Your viewers do need to understand that it wasn't a guarantee of the security of Ukraine by Russia, Britain, and the United States. It was an agreement to respect the sovereignty, independence, and existing borders. And how you interpret that word respect, of course, is challenging. The agreement does, it's only a page and a half long, does provide for any disputes to be referred to the United Nations, but we've seen that that's been completely worthless. So it brings us back to, well, what did we mean by respect in this regard? And I have discussed it with former Prime Minister John Major when I was chairman of the all-party Ukraine group in the United Kingdom Parliament. And I don't think that he had any clear idea any more than I do as to exactly what respect means. But in my personal view, it was very clear that in exchange for giving up all those nuclear weapons, and they were about the third largest arsenal in the world of such horrendous weapons, we, the signatories, Russia, United States, United Kingdom, agreed that Ukraine was a sovereign country, that its borders should be respected, and that's all been breached. And therefore, the United Nations being useless at doing anything about it, we are trying to do something about it. And I think that if, I repeat, we should be under no illusions whatever. If Putin is allowed to keep the land that he has stolen, he will regard that as a victory, albeit not the victory intended, because he intended to take the whole of Ukraine. He will still regard it and proclaim it as a victory. And then he will be emboldened to take action elsewhere. And we will be faced with a similar problem. And we will say to ourselves, well, we mustn't escalate. And the man who will escalate will be Russia, will be Putin. Serious times, and I hope your viewers out there in the Gulf do understand just how serious it is for them as well, because if Russia, as a rogue state, is emboldened, so will Iran be emboldened, although Iran has been seriously damaged by Israel and by the failure of its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, to destroy Israel. Nevertheless, do understand that they will be emboldened if Russia succeeds.
Given what you were just saying about the Budapest memorandum, given what you've said about the weaponry coming so late in the day and the hesitancy that we've seen from Ukraine's allies, you paint the picture that really Ukraine has been let down quite badly by its Western allies. Is that a correct assessment of what your take is on the situation?
Yes, I suppose the simple answer has to be yes, albeit that I do think that the whole of the West eventually came round to understanding the importance of supporting Ukraine, and to a greater or lesser extent, sovereign nations, particularly NATO members, have come to their aid. We've also, of course, provided refuge for many displaced Ukrainians who have fled the country. So I don't want to be overcritical, but this is politics, and I do want politicians to understand that if you appease an aggressor, you pay a big price. We have effectively appeased Moscow, and we are paying a price, and the Ukrainians are paying a very high price indeed. And I just feel that we should have acted more boldly and more quickly. I do salute Boris Johnson, who, in my view, took the lead on this, and without whose leadership we certainly wouldn't have had the Americans coming in and support. And I do find it astonishing that Republicans, you know, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican in American terms. I find it very depressing that our Republican friends have been so negative towards Ukraine, and so completely failing to understand the international ramifications of their failure to support what President Biden ultimately began to do in the way of practical hardware support to Ukraine. I've expressed this view to some of my friends in Washington, one of whom said that Gerald, you need to understand they're just ignorant. And I do think that there is an element of isolationism in America. They go through periods of isolation from time to time, and there will be Americans who do not see Ukraine as being part of their business, as indeed there are people in the United Kingdom who take that view. But we come back to the Budapest memorandum. Both the United States and the United Kingdom are signatories. And I believe that having signed that agreement, we have a duty to do whatever we can to support Ukraine. And frankly, the sooner Ukraine is in a position to join NATO, the better the security of Europe will be, because NATO threatens nobody. NATO is a defensive organization. Russia is not defensive. Russia is an offensive organization, which is why two hugely long-standing nations, which have been long-standing neutral nations, Finland and Sweden, just last year applied to join NATO because they too felt threatened by their neighbor, Russia.
Yeah, of course, talks are happening in Brussels today. The NATO allies are assembled there talking about the situation in Ukraine, and perhaps not resolute in their opinion and not speaking with one voice in terms of having Ukraine join the fold just yet. But just lastly, I mean, it's my last question to you. I just want to ask you, I mean, going back to where we started, talking about Sir Keir Starmer and what he was saying last night, and picking up on what you were saying about Donald Trump's incoming administration and Republican hesitancy towards Ukraine. How do you rate Sir Keir Starmer's chances of lobbying, whispering to Donald Trump and trying to bring him around to his way of thinking, many European nations' way of thinking on the subject of Ukraine? Do you think he'll succeed?
I genuinely don't know. I mean, one of the interesting things about Donald Trump is that one never knows quite what he's going to do next. And one imagines that actually he doesn't know what he's going to do next. But I do remember in 2016 being very concerned about his rhetoric about NATO and possible US withdrawal from NATO. And I bumped into the Prime Minister in the lobby of the House of Commons whilst we were voting on something. And she was just about to go to America to meet the new President Trump, the first overseas leader to see him. And I said to Theresa May, Prime Minister, when you go to Washington, please make it absolutely clear to President Trump that NATO is not just in the interests of the security of Europe, but it's also in the interests of the security of the United States. And Prime Minister May smiled at me and said, Gerald, I've already done it. And we saw that, in fact, he rode back from some of his rhetoric on NATO, that the United States remained a key member of NATO. But there was one change of significance resulting from Donald Trump's election as president, and that was that a number of European countries, members of NATO, stepped up their spending on defense, something that not just President Trump, but Prime Minister Cameron, when he was Prime Minister here, also called on those nations which were not spending 2% of GDP on defense should do. And that was a very positive result of the first Donald Trump presidency. And I like to think that he is a pragmatist, and when he takes office and receives the latest intelligence briefing from US intelligence people, that he will recognize that Russia is not an ally, is not a threat, is a threat, cannot be trusted, and therefore the United States must be bold. Whether it will happen or not, that remains to be seen.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We really appreciate it. The former British Defence Minister, Sir Gerald Howarth, thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, says that Russia likely launched an armed intercontinental ballistic missile at the city of Dnipro today, while Zelensky accuses the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, of using Ukraine as a weapons testing ground. Well, this follows earlier reports that said that the missile launched by Russia was ballistic, but not an ICBM. Well, Ukrainian air defences shot down 6 Kh-101 cruise missiles during the attack. Well, the launch is the latest sign of mounting tensions in the war after Ukraine fired US and British-supplied missiles at targets in Russia. Well, for more, we can cross to Kyiv now and speak to Olena Sotnik, who is a former MP and advisor to the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Russia is reported to have launched these intercontinental ballistic missiles today at Ukraine. It's the first time, we gather, this type of powerful weapon has been used in the conflict. What more can you tell us about that and the level of damage that it caused?
First of all, I think that it is about geopolitical damage for those who really care about international agreements, international rules, because with this, Russia demonstrated that they can blur the lines of international law and treaties. It's not like, of course, tactic nuclear weapon, but still it is kind of a signal that they can use intercontinental weapon without using air support. So for thousands of kilometers. For us, it's not just a threat to Ukraine now. It's already threat and very clear threat, very clear signal to all our partners, and I think that that reaction should be, very harsh. And even those who've been somehow flexible with Putin and thinking about getting agreement with him, they should be now very direct that this is the red line, and Russia is like playing with very dangerous kind of, risks and possible reactions and possible ruining the balance of also nuclear deterrence is there. So we should be very cautious about that. And for sure, that's, kind of more psychological threat. It is attempt, first of all, to put pressure on Ukraine, to threaten people, to threaten civil population, first of all. because what Russians doing for the last month, they're just hitting civilian areas. They're hitting residential houses without any limitations.
Sure, and I wanted to ask you about the significance of Dnipro. It's a city in the central eastern area of Ukraine, and it's been the target of quite frequent Russian attacks lately, and I'm just wondering why you think that is.
First of all, because that's one of the biggest cities on the, not on the front lines, but near the front lines. With all the capacities which supporting, first of all, humanitarian support, medical centers are there, and they're helping to those who, for example, relocated from front lines. There are a lot of IDPs living in this city. There are a lot of, as I said, hospitals there which supporting people who've been wounded, both civilians and military people. And of course, it is, one of the main cities in terms of logistics, in terms of helping to east of Ukraine. And it's one of the also of the biggest economic centers. And when you are a country in the war and your budget is really stretched and GDP is very important to continue the fight, and Ukraine really has a huge deficit, economic center like Dnipro also very important. That's why, of course, Russia is trying to break this line. They are trying to break the economic stability in order to somehow stretch Ukrainian capacity to fight.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask you whether you think this attack using this type of weaponry by Russia is a sort of a direct response to the attacks on Russian territory using these more powerful US and British missiles that have been used in the last couple of days. Is that the way it looks to you?
For me, taking into account, there is no evidence for now, but just different military experts who are analyzing the trajectory of the missile, intercontinental missile hit, and in general the characteristics of this hit, that it was more kinesthetic than explosion threat. And it means that what is Putin trying to do? He's trying to showcase that he is more powerful than he is in reality. And for sure that now he has the only one argument nowadays, to threaten, and to threaten those who are vulnerable. I mean, civilians, ordinary people in the cities which are not maybe defended as strong as, for example, Kyiv or other cities in Ukraine. And he's attacking, for example, Kryvyi Rih or Sumy, cities near the forefront, and they're attacking civilian areas. What they're trying to do, they're trying just, to frighten us, to frighten people. But in reality, that's everything about demonstrating additionally that there is no military capacity to win, but there is very terroristic style of approach to terrorize civilians, to terrorize cities, and to showcase probably mighty, but as we can see, there is nothing there in terms of the military capacity.
Let's just examine this decision by the British and the Americans to greenlight the use of these weapons. I mean, obviously there's been a lot happening in the United States in the last few weeks, and it's reported, that in his final 2 months in office, President Biden really wants to try to get Ukraine into a strong position ahead of eventual negotiations. Is that how it looks to you?
Yeah, that's true that we are trying to, we are trying to persuade our partners to take the right decision, which should be taken long time ago. And I think that's one of the main problems of kind of support of Ukraine. because like the right decisions, they are taken sooner or later, but rather later than at the moment when we need it. And that's what we can see, for example, with the counteroffensive operation in summer, which could be much more successful if our partners would support us earlier, and we didn't lose this time when Russia built their, fortifications, etc., etc. Then we had this problem with the grade bombs, and of course we would we urged much earlier our partners that we need proper air defense in order, to somehow to oppose this kind of weapons, which is like really problematic both on the forefront but for to protect civilians. And we just received, air defense aircrafts. I mean, like a few months ago. So, and now we are talking about long-range weapons. How you can win the war if the logistics centers near the forefront? It's almost impossible. And then we've been talking about that for the last 2.5 years. And and just now we are receiving partial permission to use it. I think that's the main case. That probably, like when we are hearing about red lines, but then our partners, they decide, okay, that's the moment when Russia already crossed all the red lines, and they're giving us some permissions or some support. But the question is time, and it's very important that this decision should be taken in time.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, I mean, do you think one of the red lines as far as Washington was concerned was the fact that Russia is now deploying North Korean troops to the region? Do you think that for Washington was a line that's crossed that meant perhaps Washington had to respond by saying, right, okay, Ukraine, you can now use this weaponry? Do you think that was a turning point?
I don't know if it was a turning point, but I can tell you that in general, for the international perception of the Russian war in Ukraine, we should already be cautious that it's becoming now not like regional war, but it's becoming international. And the main worry of United States, of course, was always China and Asia. And now when, it is a clear triangle of Iran and North Korea involved and Russia in the same, in the same level of raising the risks. I think that it's time to understand that there is no division between these different regional wars. It is everything in one package, and if we want to somehow deter this, and if we want to prevent huge escalation, the way how to deal with that's the way how to deal with the international conflict, where already as Asia threats of risk, Asia threat of conflict is already there, because we have fact of deployed North Korean military forces, and it's becoming really frustrating and probably more decisive movement needed.
I mean, we're 33 months into this war now. This week we passed the 1,000-day mark of conflict, and it really feels, looking at it from the outside, that things are coming to some sort of a conclusion, that things are escalating to the point that they've got to come to some sort of an end. Just so much back in the news cycle in the last couple of weeks. I mean, is that how things feel where you sit in Kyiv?
The war continues and people dies, and we continue to fight for each centimeter of our territory. I just want to remind you that thousands of Ukrainians on the occupied territories now, and they under the threat of death, tortures, etc., etc. So it is very hard to say that we are coming to conclusion. What kind of conclusion? That's the main question. Like, do we want to just cross the line between these people and Ukrainian territories which controlled by Ukraine? I think that's probably against all the principles of international law and against everything what we've been fighting for. So I wouldn't say like this. It's very difficult moment when, a lot of unclarity, a lot of frustration because of the different political cycles in different countries. Basically, I'm talking about United States and some European countries. Like we can see that, it's like more like internal policy is becoming more important than international or external threat. And I think that it should be frustrating for everyone who is taking care about the future stability of the continent, but also about the future stability of the world in general.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what I was getting at as well is the fact that, in 2 months from now, there'll be a new president in the United States. And you allude to that as well. And of course, Donald Trump saying he's going to end this war. And I'm just wondering how people in Ukraine think he's going to do that and at what price?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Of course, we can have a lot of scenarios, but I can tell you what will work. The only one decision that Ukraine is a main member of NATO, because any other decisions and to stop the to have the ceasefire, for example, doesn't mean to stop the war. And to stop the war, you need to have effective measures and effective methods of deterrence, and you need security guarantees. And NATO is the only one security guarantee which can somehow gave us the perspective of safety and not repetition of the invasion in the future. And then the question is if Biden is ready to, to move on and to talk about Ukrainian membership in NATO. That's the main question.
But in terms of the territorial price, I mean, at the moment, 1/5 of Ukrainian territory is under Russian control. I mean, do you imagine a day, or do you think it's realistic that Russia is going to relinquish control of areas of the country that it's captured?
Yeah, but that's all depends on on the general strategy of our partners and Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for their territories. It is about our sovereignty. It is about international law. Like, there is nothing to discuss. The question is, of course, we are dependent from our partners, and what would be the general solution? What would be, the understanding of the future of this world? Because, okay, if people, or for example, United States or Trump is ready to put pressure on Ukraine to give up on the territories, he should expect that the same could happen in other areas, in other regions. And then the question was the possible, conflict in Taiwan. Then how he will deal with that. So I can't tell you because it's for sure not Ukrainian interest. And Ukrainian interest to restore the sovereignty, to restore the control over our territory, and first of all, to to provide guarantee for Ukrainian people who are staying on this occupied territories without law, without any guarantee for security.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Elena Sotnik, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you. Bye.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on what's been described as a crisis tour of the Middle East. Well, his first stop is Jordan, where he arrived earlier on today, and his visit comes 5 days after the overthrow of the former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. So what is Blinken trying to achieve here? Well, Washington's top diplomat is pressing for a Syrian-led transition in Damascus, aiming to pave the way for a new inclusive government and open channels for humanitarian aid. Well, Blinken also says that the US government will fully support the new government in Damascus, and he wants to get neighbouring countries on board as well. Well, tomorrow, Blinken will fly to Turkey. Well, in recent days, neighbouring Israel has been carrying out large-scale strikes on Syria, which Israel says are intended to destroy strategic weapons in the country. Well, shortly after Assad fled Syria, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he'd ordered his army to seize the demilitarized zone in the Syrian-controlled part of the Golan Heights, a move viewed by some countries as a violation of a 1974 agreement which established the UN patrolled buffer zone. Well, to tell us more, we can speak now to Dan Meridor, who is the former Israeli Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Intelligence, who joins us from Jerusalem. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, sir. Did you see...
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Thank you. Did you see the fall of Bashar al-Assad coming?
No, I did not. As many things in recent years or in my life experience, we are sure that we know enough, with good intelligence, good assessment, and we make mistakes. One was at the 1973 war. The other was on October 7th, 2023, last year, with the attack of the barbaric Hamas group, and then the attack of Hezbollah on us. And yes, we did not see the fall. I did not see the fall of the Assad regime, I have to say. Let me just make clear, I'm not the government now. I'm not in the government. I speak for myself, and maybe other people knew. I don't think so. Things sometimes happen that we don't expect. And it's after over 50 years of the Assad family rule over Syria, not a very democratic rule, I have to say. But the collapse of this regime is creating an opportunity for a new era for Syria and for all of us.
Yes, indeed, and I appreciate you pointing out that you're a former minister and a former deputy prime minister. You do not represent the government of Israel. But tell me this, do you think people in Israel feel safer without Bashar al-Assad in power in Damascus?
Well, I would say this, we don't know what comes next, and it's in the making now. Maybe Secretary Blinken's visit has to do with that, and the talk with Turkey, which might have had something to do with what happened in Syria, has to do with that. If in the end of this transition we have a stable and prosperous and peaceful Syria, this will be good for all of us. It is outside this axis of Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, that really was hit quite badly because of their stupid attack on us. And if what we see is a good neighbor, good for them, first of all, and not a dictatorship, not a regime like the Assad family had there, but a more stable and prosperous regime, it's going to be good, first of all, for the Syrians, and then for the neighbors, including us.
We've heard numerous reports of Israeli strikes across Syrian territory during the last few days. The latest strikes reportedly close to Damascus. What's your understanding of what Israel is trying to achieve here?
Well, here I have to repeat, I'm not speaking for the government. I don't have in my possession the calculation. People say in the press that they wanted to make sure that those who come in will not be the Al-Qaeda sort of people who will be a big problem for all of us, but I can't tell you. Assad had, I suppose, had been piling up capability of chemical weapons, maybe chemical weapons. This might have been the target. I'm not a good source for this question. I don't know the answer. In the end, this is not the solution. The solution needs to be a stable Syrian regime, hopefully for them inclusive with all the sects, whether it's Alawites or Shiites or Sunni or Druze, Christians, whoever there is. And maybe Syria will try to catch its place in a more normal atmosphere than in the past. What happens now is people try to make sure that their interests are guarded, but in the end, it's the Syrian interest that should be taken into account, hopefully by a stable and peaceful regime.
Indeed, but when we look at these 500-plus Israeli strikes that have been carried out across Syria during the last few days, I mean, I know you can only speculate, but there are a lot of people speculating as well on Israel's behalf that this is all part of some sort of territorial expansion plan. What do you say to that?
As I said, I don't speak for the government, and to tell you secretly, nobody here is I'm in opposition to the government, so I'm not the guy to ask. But I don't think it's an expansion plan. This seems crazy. I don't think so. What we need is a stable and peaceful neighbor, not expansion. What is expansion for? I don't think that's the goal. But again, you need to find somebody from the government, and they will answer you more authoritatively than I can do.
Are you encouraged by the messages we've heard coming out of the new leadership in Damascus?
Well, I see television, I hear the press. I don't know who speaks for what. Whether Mr. Al-Julani is seeking peace and stability and good neighborly relationship, then it's great. If it's not there, and if he does not consolidate the power, I don't know who comes next. It's a big question mark. No doubt the Assad regime was not one of the good guys, first of all, for Syria. They massacred hundreds of thousands of Syrians in what they called mistakenly the Arab Spring. It was a very heavy spring then. So it was not a good regime for the Syrians, first of all. Now they fled, they're out. Will there be a better regime? No, they can take the option or the example of Egypt, who had peace with us, and I think is gaining from it. No Israeli or Egyptian was killed or wounded in over almost 50 years now. Jordan and Israel have a peace treaty, another peace treaty that works well for both sides. It's not that all problems are over. We have the Palestinian question that is not yet resolved and needs to be resolved. But there was the Iranian Axis threat that was threatening not merely us, but what they call the moderate Sunni countries, both the nuclear ambitions and the subversive activities all over the place with the proxies. And if the Sixes has been dealt a blow, I don't think people should be sorry for that. Will there be a stability? I hope there is, and I hope we can contribute to that.
As we said in the introduction, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Jordan on this so-called crisis tour. I believe it's his 12th visit to the region since the 7th of October attacks of last year. What do you think he can achieve during this regional visit?
Well, I have no clue as to what he is about. I think that, first of all, Jordan might have been on the target list of the Iranian Axis, and they might have been trying to destabilize it. I hope this is somewhat, if not over, at least much weaker challenge now. Jordan is a neighbor of Syria. And in the past, Syria attacked Jordan in 1970, trying to topple down the regime. And we have helped King Hussein to survive, if you remember that. I think that Jordan has an interest. They have, I think, many Syrian refugees in Jordan. So I think the feeling that America is in good context, an ally, if you like, with Jordan is important for Jordan. There is a vacuum here. If really what we see is a weakening of the Iranian influence here, who fills in this vacuum? I think if America steps in, it's good for everybody. If others will step in, I don't know what the result will be.
One of the dilemmas for the United States and for lots of other countries as well is looking at the new leaders in Damascus and asking whether the group in charge, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, should be taken off a terrorism designation list. Knowing what you know of them, and I know you're not party to sort of internal government documents, but what's your thinking? Should they go off that list?
I don't know enough. I know things about their past. Everybody knows that. They were not the good guys. They were part of terror groups. Have they changed? Do they really mean to rule Syria peacefully? It was quite encouraging to understand that there was an instruction not to go for vengeance and not to destroy everything around you. We'll see how it develops. If they want to be inclusive and find a way to resuscitate Syria from the awful results of the Assad regime and the massacres, then it's good. I can't tell you. I don't know enough. I believe the American intelligence and maybe ours and others will try to find out as much as they can. And I think people will be judged by their actions, and the people will see what they do. The tones that came out of Damascus were a little more encouraging than what one might have expected. But is it just music? Is the lyrics different lyrics? We'll hear.
One of the things we heard from King Abdullah in Jordan there in those talks with Antony Blinken was that the first step towards reaching comprehensive regional calm is to end the Israeli war in Gaza, he said. Why do you think there's been so little progress when it comes to the diplomacy? And as we've been saying, 12 visits to the region by Antony Blinken, still no ceasefire. Why not?
Well, I hear what the Americans said. They said Hamas is to take the blame. They don't want to come in, so I can't speak for them. Hamas has been hit very badly, but still they hold 100 hostages that they kidnapped. And they like robbers. They want ransoms. They want something in return. And as long as they are not ready to return them, there won't be an end to the war. There were negotiations. There are negotiations being held, I understand, behind the scenes, not on the screen. So I don't know. I don't see any reason to continue the war in Gaza if they really let all the prisoners go, those that they kept. It's civilians that were taken from their homes, from their beds, in an awful way. And some of them are already dead, some may be dying, so we need to do it quickly. But the other question is, who rules Gaza next? Is it Hamas again, or is there a way that the Palestinian leadership will have another option, which is more positive? The Palestinian Authority, which is quite weak, I have to admit, with the help of maybe other Arab countries, maybe some other arrangement, but it's not only the military side of Hamas. Hamas does not accept the very existence of Israel in the state openly, and they will not go for any agreement. So they should not be the rulers of Gaza, as far as one can say. Is there an option? I don't know. The government is not... I don't influence the government. I would try to include the Palestinian Authority, although they are not the strongest now. I think they are the address, with help of others, to rebuild a control and government in Gaza. We have left Gaza altogether almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 20 years ago, in 2005. And rather than making Gaza a paradise, they made it hell. And made it piled up arms and made it a launching pad for rockets against us. So if there is another leadership coming up, I would recommend the Palestinian Authority, and around it something to build. President Biden offered something like this. The Israeli government didn't like it. Definitely Hamas doesn't like it. Is the situation now better for this? I don't know. Open question, but we should ask ourselves what comes next for Gaza. After the war is over, hopefully as soon as possible, and the hostages released and going back to the families, those who are alive and those who are dead, unfortunately, the body should be brought back. This should be over, as it may be over in Lebanon. Hopefully, it seems better there, and then both countries, Lebanon with all that happened there, and the Gaza area that is independent of Israel for over 20 years, needs to find a way to live peacefully and successfully for their own population and for their neighbors, including us.
Just lastly, sir, obviously there's 5 weeks left of the Biden administration, so I'm not sure whether Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is going to be able to achieve a ceasefire deal before President Biden leaves office. Then, of course, comes President Trump with a new team. He's talked about his team taking shape. We've got this Middle East envoy who's sort of part of the family, Massad Boulos. He's got his ambassador for Israel lined up. What's your thinking when you see that team taking shape? What do you think it means for your country and for the region as a whole?
I'll tell you something that usually people and politicians don't like to say. The only true answer is, I have no clue. I knew what to expect for the Biden administration. I liked it. I didn't like it. It's all questions of my position, their position. Basically, I liked it. Trump offers all sorts of things. What will he make good and what not, and what these people will bring, I don't know. I think it's an open game. Hopefully, they will do the right thing. That is to say, stabilize the Middle East, back the more stable forces rather than the revolutionary forces, build a front to help the allies of America, Saudis, others, and Israel against the possible Iranian subversion. But then in the end, hopefully even find a way to live with the Iranians who have their own right to live there, but not to turn the Middle East into chaos. So it's about policy in the Middle East. It's an important area for America, for the world, for all sorts of reasons. And there is, I think, will to try to stabilize it. And the forces that destabilized it caused this awful thing the last over a year, since October 7th. Attack unprovoked, nobody foresaw it coming. And then in one day, the Hezbollah joined in, although we had done nothing to them. And the whole thing went into chaos. And a lot of lives have been lost, a lot of destruction. And this is bad. So can we go back to normalcy? Not to normalize war, subversion, and terror, but to normalize normal life? America stands for this usually, and whether it's Biden or Trump or whoever the president is, I hope America will do whatever they can to help bring about a stable and peaceful Middle East.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Former Israeli Deputy Prime Minister Dan Meredith, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that is all we have time for this special edition of Global News Today. Wherever you are in the world, and if you're celebrating Christmas, we wish you all the very best.
At Al Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
At Al Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.